IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is Monday. That is Sean Davis. I'm Brian Driscoll. Sean, we got a lot we got to get to today, man. So we're going to dive right in. This is Monday Mailbag, Sean, but there's some topics that we're going to cover first before we get into the mailbag. There's a decent chance some news is going to break during our show. If it does, we'll get to that. But we're going to talk about Bo Collins committing to Notre Dame. We're going to talk about Sam Hartman's decision to not play in the bowl game, which was expected. And then we're going to talk about some All-American stuff with Notre Dame before we then dive into the mailbag. If news does break during the show, obviously we will talk about it. So some Notre Dame players are making decisions. Obviously, Nana Osafo-Mensah earlier announced he was headed to TCU. Braylon James is also going to TCU. Holden Stace is going to Tennessee. So a lot of stuff going on, man. A lot of stuff going on, Sean. But let's begin talking about the good news for Notre Dame. Obviously, they got some big news yesterday. A second wide receiver has committed to Notre Dame in the transfer portal, with Clemson wide receiver Bo Collins committing to Notre Dame yesterday. Sean, you and I expected this for a few days. The visit needed to go well, but coming into the visit, and Bo's visit started, I think, Wednesday. Coming into the visit, it was, how's it going to go? But it was, you felt good about it. They just had to close. Things went very well. Notre Dame did a great job, obviously, with Bo, who now comes to Notre Dame with 1 year of experience remaining. Bo is a kid that played 3 years at Clemson, was a starter, started 27 games of the 27 of the 32 games he played. He caught 91 passes for 1,290 yards and 11 touchdowns during his career, former top 100 recruit, and a guy that Notre Dame tried to recruit out of high school. Probably top five-ish or so for him. But when it all came down to it, they weren't really a top contender. But now they have Bo Collins, and it just gives Notre Dame yet another weapon in the pass game, Sean.
It's so interesting watching how everything's turned out. You know, you previously mentioned all of the former Notre Dame players that ended up at other programs. And I think there's more of an emphasis, even if you do a National Signing Day coming up, it's very important with the way the transfer portal is now to make sure you come in second and third if you don't come in first. Right? Because it's relationships that leads to who the young men in the transfer portal connect to. You talked about it. Bo Collins, you know, Notre Dame might not have been in that top three for him, but, he had been to see the campus. He had camped in Notre Dame. He was recruited by Notre Dame, so there was something there. And then you connect the dots on some other things that were happening at the same time. It put Notre Dame in a favorable position, and like you said, it seems like they knocked his visit out the park, when he came. And so, when you get that and you get the current climate of the transfer portal that goes to, him already have Notre Dame is a place where it's more attractive when you've been there and you have familiarity with what you're going to be walking into. And it's not kind of a smack in the face, because Notre Dame is a different place. It's a different place. And I think Bo Collins knows exactly what he's walking into.
He said that. I mean, he basically said that in I think a tweet or something he put out, where basically he said there's no place like Notre Dame. This is a kid that just came from Clemson, which is a premier program that is, that everybody Super Bowl kind of thing. But he said there's nothing like Notre Dame. Nobody gives you the exposure, just all the different things that Notre Dame gives you. I mean, Bo said it, flat out said it. And this is a kid. I mean, it's one thing for Chris Mitchell to say it. It's another, or you look at some of the other guys that Notre Dame's looking at, they're trying to get the kicker from South Carolina, Mitch Jeter. If it's, we all know about Riley Leonard and RJ Oben. It's one thing for those guys to say it, who are from Duke and Florida National and South Carolina. But this is a kid that came from Clemson. Right. And so it does speak volumes, Sean. There's a small handful of programs where it's just different.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that can prepare you for that except actually putting on that gold helmet or the Alabama helmet or the Ohio State helmet. I mean, there's just a small number of programs where that is just a different animal from anywhere else you can go, man. It really is.
So I'm looking forward to how this young man brings his experience to Notre Dame. And you know what else? With all these guys, and this is something you and I talked about over the weekend. Will one of these guys that come in through the portal be a leader, whether it's vocally, by example. Man, heaven knows we need leadership in that wide receiver room.
Sure.
As long as they are. So I'm very interested in that as well. And a guy like Bo Collins with that statement lets you know that he seems very comfortable with who he is in his skin and how he fits into Notre Dame on and off the field. And that bodes well because that means he can hit the ground running. As soon as they start. Uh, Mike Brown was official yesterday. Hopefully, the strength and conditioning coach definitely, I'm sure, is going to be in position. But by the time the freshman second week of January they report.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine. I mean, I would hope that that'll be done before the bowl game.
Before the bowl
Honestly, I
game,
mean,
yes,
even if he
yes.
doesn't have an impact okay, we're going to help you prepare for the bowl game.
Mm-hmm.
You hope that it's going to be there for that part. But you talk about the leadership part too, Sean, and if you've got two veterans coming back on the current roster,
Mm-hmm.
Jaden Thomas and Deion Colsey. The problem that you have is those guys are both, they just haven't shown the ability to stay healthy during their career. Now, Bo Collins has had his own share of, missing a couple games here and there with injuries as well. And I don't believe, and I think some people view these transfer pickups as, well, you don't have faith in the guys you have in the room. Not even close. Not even close. It's just more about the last 2 years Notre Dame has gone into each season with, if everything goes right, you should be okay at the position. But this is football. Things don't go right. Somebody's going to get injured. Usually multiple somebodies are going to get injured. Somebody's not going to pan out. And what they're doing is, we're not going to get into a situation like we did last year at receiver or like we did this year at receiver. We're going to go out and get the best competition that we can find.
Mm-hmm.
And if that means, hey, there's going to be competition in the room, then there's going to be competition in the room. And from what we saw this year, I do believe Jared Parker is someone who likes to be able to use 5-6 receivers in the game. So that's obviously a plus. But you need to be in a situation too, Sean, where you're adding different body types. And that's another part of what Bo Collins brings to the table, Sean. So when you look at it, you're talking about a 6'3", 210-pound kid who brings size that you really don't have on the roster other than Deion Colsey. And he brings a kind of a vertical skill set. When I mean vertical, I don't mean like a speed vertical skill set. I just mean a bigger body. He's a long strider. He gives you a little more girth than what you had from Tobias Merriweather, a little more play strength than you had with Tobias Merriweather, more of a boundary body, boundary game, and a guy that can when I break down his film, Sean, it was a very frustrating endeavor breaking down his film. Number one, and I texted Ryan this the other day, I was like, I remember just how much I hate Clemson's offense. And it got better this year, but it still wasn't great. And you've got this 6'3", 210-pound vertical kid who's running bubble screens and, quick game like he's 5'10", 195. And you just watch him and you're like, when they did allow him to do more things to win at the line, work the middle of the field, work vertical, work the comebacks, he was quite effective in those areas. And so you look at the Notre Dame aspect of it and you say, well, how Notre Dame uses their boundary, to me, fits the skill set that Notre Dame doesn't really have. I'm a lot higher on Tobias Merriweather than most, but Tobias isn't a guy that you're just going to throw back shoulders to, one-on-one, go up and get it. He's more of a get out there, beat the guy, throw it out, let him run underneath it kind of guy. Deion Colsey can be that kind of guy. We've seen him do it in games. We saw him do it against USC last year, had won a contested catch but Deion's just one guy, and he hasn't been able to stay healthy. Jaden Thomas isn't that kind of back shoulder type of guy. Jaden Greathouse can be to a degree at 6'1", but you're adding a guy that brings a little bit more of that length, that body type, that wide catch radius that you don't have a lot of. And the thing about Bo Collins, too, is this isn't a we don't like Deion Colsey move. This is from what I'm told, they do like Deion Colsey quite a bit. He's got to stay healthy. But if Deion breaks out and becomes that guy, Bo Collins is a kid that started games at X. He started games at Z. He spent most of his freshman year playing in the slot. Now, you don't want to play him in the slot. This is a continued misuse of Bo Collins at Clemson. However, what I'm saying is there are plenty of things you can do with those two on the field together.
Mhm.
Also, these are two kids that haven't always been the healthiest in their careers. So if you're playing both of them in the boundary, then you're taking a little bit of that wear and tear off of both of their bodies a little bit. So there's a lot of things that make sense here, Sean, from adding a skill set standpoint. But I believe a big part of it is you needed to get a guy with boundary skills in the portal, because otherwise you were Deion Colzie or bust in 2024. And as much as I love Deion Colzie, you know that, you need another guy there that can be there, because you can play two guys that have that similar skill set, not just in a rotation, but on the field together. If you want to go big, you can go 12 personnel, put Deion on one side, Bo on the other. You got your two tight ends. Now we can run at you, but we also have some size where we can throw downfield at you. There's a lot of different things you can do. You needed to add this particular type of skill set to the portal. You needed a outside field, stretch the field, big play guy. You got that in Chris Mitchell. You needed a boundary body, a guy that can win contested catches, can win at the line. Go ask Benjamin Morrison if Bo Collins can win off the line. You saw the couple third down plays where he beat Benjamin off the line. Not a lot of people can say they beat Benjamin off the line. And the slant route he caught against Benjamin was really impressive. I mean, beat him on the line, stemmed him up, snapped him at the top. Benjamin goes this way, and he gets open. And you're like, you don't see people just beat. A lot of the receptions Benjamin gives up are kind of, they're playing a little bit of off man. He'll give up certain routes. There's not a lot of guys that spin him around. Bo spun him around twice in that game. So this is a kid that has a feel for running good routes, and just brings a skill set that, just fact is, Sean, Notre Dame just needed.
Man, let me tell you something. That was one of the things that stood out to me, because like you said, I think two receivers have spun Ben Morrison. One is an NFL first rounder that's playing his tail off for the Minnesota Vikings and Jordan Addison. And the other one was Bo Collins in that game against Clemson. So you're impressed by that. I talked about the leadership he brings, but also with him being a technician, that's somebody for the young receivers to watch how he works and his work ethic. I'm interested in seeing that as well. But this is another thing that you touched on. Like, I really want to hear what you say about this. We talked to Reggie Brooks on Saturday, and he brought up the need to have football players. Like, Notre Dame just needs to have more football players. And you can have that even in the positional room, not just offense, defense on the team. You can have that in the positional room. And I like the way Notre Dame's going about their business, because it seems like they're just getting football players, right? There's this scene in the movie Ray where, he's divvying up parts. And one of the girls is like, I don't sing alto. I'm a soprano. And then Regina King is like, we'll sing any part. Like, we were taught to sing every part growing up. That's how we were trained. And you want guys in the wide receiver room. It's like, I'm not just an X guy. I'm not just a Z guy. Oh, you could put me in the slot as well. And they went out and they got two guys in the transfer portal that are football players at their position. You can put them anywhere. So Notre Dame now is put in a position of versatility, of depth, to whereas they won't get caught with their pants down like they did this year. That once this guy, who is strictly a boundary guy the majority of the time, goes down, that's all we have at that position. Right. So now what do? Now our youngsters, we have to ask them to play out of position. And that's a difficult experience and a difficult task for young men just coming into college football when they're trying to learn their way. So I think this really puts Notre Dame at an advantage from a depth standpoint, a versatility standpoint, football player standpoint, but it also strengthens your young group of players that can now do what they're best at,
right,
as they learn the game.
Right, because you look at it now, and they are still going to try to go for a third receiver. Now, they're not going to take in just anybody. They're not looking for just a body. They're just keeping their eyes open for an impact player. But you've got Bo Collins, Chris Mitchell as transfers. You have Jaden Thomas, Deion Colzie as rising seniors. So you have 4 veterans. Then you have Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison coming back as younger players. right?
Mhm.
And then also you have Caleb Smith. So you have 4 veterans that have played a lot of football.
Mhm.
You have 2 rising sophomores who have played a lot of football, and then another rising sophomore that's a talented kid that, obviously missed most of the season, so his development is a little bit behind. But you now have 7 kids before you have to get to any of the freshmen, which is a little different than this year. We said going into this year that at least one freshman was going to have to play. You couldn't
Mhm.
fill out your depth chart without at least one freshman having to play. And we ended up seeing 3 freshmen throughout the year play at different times. And so next year, you're going to have at least 2 injuries or guys not playing well before you have to play a freshman
Mhm.
based on the moves they're making now. And so now if a freshman's going to play a Cam Williams, a Micah Gilbert, Logan Saldate, it's because they beat somebody out. That's the difference. And that's really where you want to be. So if you're playing Cam Williams next year, it's not because you have to. Like, you had to play Rico Flores this year. You had to play Jade Greathouse. Now, they may have been ready anyway, but you had
Right.
to play them. You had to play Jordan Faison. I mean, Notre Dame really did not want to take that scholarship away. I mean, there's a reason they didn't play Jordan Faison a snap the first 5 games, 6 games,
Yeah.
because they did want to preserve that scholarship in the red shirt, right? Because he was here on a lacrosse scholarship. This got to the point where, number one, there's 2 reasons why they ended up biting the bullet and playing him. Number one, it's all the injuries at receiver. Number 2, Jordan Faison just kept making plays in practice, right? That's the other part of it, right? Or it's just kind of like the 2 things combined. You're just like, we can't justify sitting this kid anymore.
Mhm.
Like, we have to play him and just he's one of us now, right? Essentially, but you had to play those guys.
Yeah.
Now you're in a situation where you have to lose a couple guys before you have to play a freshman.
Yeah.
And that's an ideal situation, because then, as I said, if Cam Williams is on the field next year, it's because that kid's really good and he forced his way into the field, which you and I both expect him to do. If Micah
Absolutely.
Gilbert's making plays next year, it's because he came in and said, yeah, you're a veteran. That's nice, but I'm better than you. And he earned that opportunity. Same with Logan Saldate. So these are reasons why they're going for it. It's not about they don't have faith in Jaden Thomas or Deion Colsey. I think those 2 players' injury histories is something you have to account for. But if Jaden Thomas goes out there and beats those guys out, he'll play a bunch. If Deion Colsey goes out and beats out Bo Collins, he'll play. But we saw this in the spring, Sean, because Deion Colsey beat out Caleb Smith, who came in as an All-American or second team All honorable mention All ACC player at Virginia Tech. They brought him in, and Deion just outplayed him. So this isn't a thing where, Bose was guaranteed playing time or guaranteed a starting job. Same with Chris Mitchell. These guys know they have to come in and compete, but the opportunity is there. And the one thing that helped Notre Dame in making this pitch is, guys, look how many receivers we played. Even before we had all the injuries, we played 5, 6, sometimes 7 guys in a game. I actually think it was a little bit too much. They went a little too deep early, but you're going to have 5 guys that you're going to play. So those are all aspects of it, Sean, that you say, hey, this is why this move happened.
Yeah.
For Bo Collins. So makes sense what your needs on the roster were. You needed that kind of skill set, position fit, and Bo's a good player. Bo was a solid player at Clemson. My thing is, I believe he has a chance to be better than that in a different offense. But if all he gives you is what he's given you the last 3 years, this is a good pickup.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is like, if Bo Collins, and it's a little different than Chris Mitchell, because Chris Mitchell, you're projecting what you think he can do at the Power 5 level based on like a game against a Power 5 team. With Bo Collins, it's like you look at Notre Dame's schedule next year, Sean. I'm just actually going to look at it right now. Notre Dame 2024 football schedule. And if you look at Notre Dame's schedule, Bo Collins has already played against 1, 2, 3, at least 4 teams on the schedule.
Right.
He's already played against, and he's played at that level. So, he has a 100-yard game in his career against Louisville already, so he's been able to, he scored a touchdown, I believe, last year against Georgia Tech. So he's played against these teams. The skill set is much easier to how it's going to translate. And so my thing is, you have to get a guy from the Power 5 level that if he simply repeats what he's already shown, is this a good pickup for you? And for me with Bo Collins, it is. Because if he's just what he was the last few years at Clemson, it's a good pickup. It's a good addition to your room. But I also believe that the staff feels, and maybe I shouldn't project onto them, I feel that in a different type of offense, a more pro-style spread instead of the traditional spread that Clemson runs, I think Bo Collins can be a more effective player. Be a 15-plus yards per catch guy, be a guy that does more outs, comebacks, goes, posts, ins, things like that, can win off the line in one-on-one quick game, which we've seen him do. So I think there's a lot of value. And then, of course, Sean, anytime you have competition, it's good. Because now, if Deion, we've always said if Deion goes out there and competes the way he needs to and works the way he needs to, he could be a star. Well, now Deion's in a situation where he has to work if he wants to be the guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so this move also kind of excites me because, like, could this be the catalyst for Deion to say, okay, I'm going to go show y'all what I got? And if that happens, now you've not only added Bo's skill set, but if Bo can push Deion to raise his game, now you really got something.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because I'll say it again, and it's especially true now. I don't know that there's, just from a God-given ability standpoint, if there's a better receiver on the roster right now than Deion Colzie. Just raw God-given ability. You can't teach that size. You can't teach that length. You can't teach that speed. The athleticism he possesses. This is a kid that played cornerback in high school.
Yeah.
So now if this can be that thing that drives him to say, okay, it's time for me to step up and put in the work, you could have something really impressive next year.
Something you just tapped into right there. I am very intrigued even more by what you just said with the strength and conditioning hire. Because when you have consistent injuries, you worry about that athleticism being chipped away at. And kids maybe not being as fast or as athletic as they used to be. And that's difficult for a young man in college to have to learn how to kind of change his game because he's not moving the same. So I'm very interested in, number one, the new strength and conditioning coach, where they can get Jaden Thomas and Deion Colzie. Two, from a health standpoint, can he keep both of those guys explosive or make them even more explosive than they were? And then whether or not they can stay on the field. So that, for both of those guys that you mentioned, that's something that's going to be like a conduit to see whether or not they can go ahead and take off based upon what we know they can do athletically.
So Bo Collins to Notre Dame, number 2 transfer pickup of the offseason for Notre Dame at wide receiver, number 3 overall, obviously joining Jordan Clark, who's transferring in from Arizona State. Other news that dropped yesterday, Sean, and we'll just briefly talk about this. We'll maybe talk more about this in a future show, but Notre Dame have made it official. Mike Brown will be the receivers coach. So that's going to be part of it too, because everybody's going to walk into that room saying, you've got something to prove. Hey, I don't care who started last year. I don't care. Good coaches do this. I don't care who started last year. I don't care who was the guy last year. I don't care who was the slot, the X, the Z, whatever. Guys, you're all starting with a fresh slate with me. And so if you think that you didn't get the opportunities you should have got last year, or you think that's fine. That's last year. You've got just as much opportunity as anybody else now. So go out and compete and show me something. Everything will be earned from what you do from now moving forward. I promise you, if Mike Brown is a good football coach, which his track record seems to show that he certainly is, Sean, I'm very impressed with what I see. I promise you some version of that conversation will be had with the wide receivers. Because I don't know what happened in the past. I don't care. I don't care what went into who started this, that, the other thing. I don't care about all that, right? I don't care about who had this attitude or that attitude or who was liked or whatever is going on, right? It's about who are you right now moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be something that can fuel guys too, because like you may think like, man, I don't, this guy doesn't like me. I don't get along. This guy doesn't believe in me. But now you get a new guy. Okay, now I get a fresh start. I can go show something. And that's going to be part of it too. So Mike Brown is the new receivers coach at Notre Dame. We did find this answer out when once a football coach is officially hired, it's not like players, so like if, a guy transfers in right now, he can't play the bowl game. CJ Carr, we anticipate getting in some practices with the team leading he can't play in the game. Mm-hmm. Coaches can start working right away. So I'm kind of joking here, but Jared Parker has been demoted as the receivers coach. Mike Brown is the new
If
receiver.
there was an audio part of the chat, I'm sure like hand claps are going on all through the chat.
Well, Jared Parker, obviously a very strong track record as receivers coach, but we never anticipated that move being permanent. In all seriousness, we always anticipated that he was simply going to work with them until you got a receivers coach. There was never another name that I heard. We threw out Jamarcus Shepard because we like Jamarcus Shepard, but there was never a name.
Right.
I mean, almost immediately it was like Mike Brown's the name, and so now that is done. Like what he brings to the table, Sean. Everything I've heard about him, hard worker, really smart technical guy. Is going to add value from a game planning standpoint. We see the product on the field at Cincinnati. He goes to Wisconsin this year, associate head coach, which says a lot about what Luke Fickell thought about him beyond just his receiving coach ability.
Yeah.
Right. But you also look at it. He brought a kid with him from Cincinnati who didn't really play a whole lot at Cincinnati, transfers with him to Wisconsin, and becomes his top pass catcher this past year. So I think that says something. I mean, again, Will Pauling in 2 years under Mike Brown at Cincinnati caught one pass for 6 yards as a freshman and in a redshirt season, caught 12 passes for 122 yards in year 2 at Cincinnati, and then transfers with him to Wisconsin, leads their team in receiving the receptions this year with 66 and also receiving yards with 694 and 4 touchdowns. So, again, just more evidence that this guy knows how to develop players. So he'll get that chance to work with what will, in my opinion, be the deepest and most talented room he's ever had, which is saying something because he had a receiver room in 2021 that had a 2nd-round pick, a 3rd-round pick, and a 4th-round pick on it in Alec Pierce, Trey Tucker, and Tyler Scott. Yeah. So we'll certainly talk more about Coach Brown as we get into the offseason and move forward. But the other big news today, Sean, Sam Hartman announced today that he is not going to be playing in the bowl game. He kind of announced it. It was like in his way of announcing it. He never actually said, I'm not playing in the bowl game. Like we already knew he wasn't going to play, and it was kind of like his goodbye to college football, which I actually thought the video was kind of cool, even though I wish like he didn't announce it, just from a news breaking standpoint, announce it. And then, of course, Notre Dame puts out Notre Dame's social media team has done a lot of good things this year, but that whole peanut butter jelly time with the banana was like, okay, this is one of the lamest things you guys have ever done. Like, come on, guys. But anyway,
you didn't like the 8-bit banana?
No, not even a little bit. But the career for Sam Hartman has come to a close at Notre Dame and in college football. He will finish his career as a top 5 all-time passer in passing yards and passing touchdowns. Had a quality season for Notre Dame. We'll talk more about it in the mailbag, Sean. But well, let's just get into it now, and we can discuss it here. But the way that he's going to be viewed is interesting. We had someone in the chat, that asked the question. Actually, I'll just kind of bring it up as we're talking. But they were talking about, this right here. Does the Leonard experiment have a better chance of success than the Hartman failure? And I think this is kind of one of those things where it can be frustrating having these conversations because you can say in one breath it didn't go how we hoped, but the alternative is not it was a failure, right? And that's kind of the frustration. It's this all or nothing mentality we have. Sam Hartman did some good things for Notre Dame this year. There's no doubt about it. He put up good numbers. He had the highest quarterback rating for Notre Dame quarterback since Jimmy Clausen back in 2009. It was, I believe, the 3rd or 4th best single season all-time quarterback rating mark at Notre Dame. He averaged well over 8 yards a completion an attempt this season. He put up some good numbers, had some good games. The reality is Sam Hartman fell victim to the thing that has plagued Notre Dame for a long time, which is that he did not play one of the biggest games. And that has just been a constant theme from Notre Dame quarterbacks that Sam Hartman continued. But his Notre Dame career is over. We'll talk about him briefly, Sean, and then obviously we'll talk about, what we're going to see in the bowl game. But Sam Hartman was not as good as we'd hoped he would be this season, but he was far, far from a failure either, Sean. I mean, so he did some good things for Notre Dame. And the biggest thing for me beyond the production is he's a kid that seemed bought in from day one. And the way he acted is not like a guy that was a rental player who was just here for a short period of time and he was going to leave. I mean, he completely embraced Notre Dame. And at the very least, fans should respect that part about it, however you feel about the product on the field.
It's just interesting when you talk about how he embraced Notre Dame. It just goes back to having an understanding in the original question, like in comparison to Riley Leonard. We'll, like I said, we'll get into that breaking down whether or not he has a better chance to be more successful. I think he comes in a more advantageous situation. I think Sam Hartman came in the very last year with probably the toughest schedule that Notre Dame had put up maybe in the last 5 years. You know, we can go back and look, but this is one of the toughest schedules. Before it played out, we thought Duke was going to be a tough game right after Ohio State. Before we watched Duke play this year, just before the season, it's
that
like,
was our
yo,
trap game before the
that's
season.
going to be a tough game coming off of that emotional Ohio State game. And then having Duke actually be a really good team, it's like, okay, it becomes even more difficult. Now Riley Leonard steps into a situation where Notre Dame, like you said, the expectations are all or nothing because there's no conference alignment. You know, you have to either go undefeated or one good loss to make it into the playoff. So it is a all or nothing feel every year. Now now you can coach a Notre Dame team to peak. See, Notre Dame had to be a peak performance against Ohio State. Like, dude, we have to play our best against Ohio State and win that game. Now you have Texas A&M, but that game might not be as daunting as you thought it was. But we'll see how the portal plays out. Mike Elko is a really good coach. He's made some good hires in his assistants. But now Marcus Freeman can coach this team to peak going into November and not having the pressure of, you know, having to win every game. Because now if Notre Dame has 2 losses, more than likely they're going to be right there to get into a 12-team playoff. If they have 1 loss, more than likely they're definitely going to be in the 12-team playoff. So now I'm very interested in how Notre Dame approaches, you know, going into a season now in comparison to the way they used to have to go into seasons with the pressure of winning every single game. This is going to be a different thing that Riley Leonard is stepping into than Sam Hartman stepped into. So, you know, I just with that thought, I think expectations should be a little bit different than they were for Sam Hartman. Because, I was one of the people that said, look, stop putting all this. Fans just went crazy when Sam Hartman announced he was coming to Notre Dame. And I'm like, yo, Sam Hartman is not a guy that's going to carry you. He has to be
there was never a doubt about that. And
he has to be part of a team.
We'll dive into the Riley Leonard stuff when that time comes. But that was the thing is he was the kind, to me, was the hope was that he'd be the kind of that perfect trigger man, that he could just get the ball where it needed to get to. And for a lot of reasons, he just wasn't able to do that enough in some of the biggest moments. But the fact is the kid played hard and he embraced his teammates. He embraced Notre Dame. He was embraced by Notre Dame. And I remember being at senior day, Sean, and they announced him last and he got the biggest ovation. And at first I was kind of annoyed by it. But then I remembered, wait, I'm sitting there right by the Wake Forest crowd up top. And of course they're going to be excited about it. But somebody had said in a chat or in a response to a tweet, because I just thought it was a little bit cringy, the whole, you know, and I'll always love you thing for Whitney Houston that they did with him on the screen. And I'm like, this kid's been here for a year. And like, why aren't we doing this for like, you know, Zeke Correll and you know,
Cam Hart.
Cam Hart and some of these other guys who number one in Cam's situation, not only has been here longer, was a better player. You know, why aren't we doing this for like JD Bertrand and guys like that? You know, it is what it is. But then somebody made a comment like, look, part of the reason is because he embraced Notre Dame. And I think that endeared him to a lot of people on top of being a quarterback. And so those are a lot of the reasons why I think people will respect Sam Hartman. Let's turn the table a little bit, Sean, and talk about, okay, what does this mean for Notre Dame now?
Mm-hmm.
And while I would have preferred Sam played in the bowl game, and I'm not a big fan of opt-outs. I don't think there's an injury concern that should have kept him out of the bowl game. It is what it is. So let's talk about what is there. And what is there is obviously Steve Angeli is going to be the starting quarterback in the game. What I don't know is whether or not they will also play Kenny Minchie. I hope there's a plan for that. I don't know if there will be. But this is a huge opportunity for Steve Angeli, because there's a lot of people, myself included, who don't believe Steve Angeli is a championship caliber quarterback. Now, some people take that to mean you think he sucks. No, I don't think he sucks. I think he's a good football player. I think he's got some ability. I just don't think Steve is a championship caliber quarterback. But this is going to be his first chance to show us that we are incorrect or not. Because even though Oregon State will have some opt-outs, they're going to still have a very talented defensive football team. They are one of the best defenses in the country. They have been the last 2 years. Trent Bray has done a great job the last 2 years with this Oregon State defense. And it's going to be a test. It's going to be a test. There's no doubt about it, Sean. And so this is a team that's going to bring a lot of pressure against Steve Angeli anyway, but they're definitely going to do it now that he is – now that he's the starting quarterback. I mean, you're talking about an Oregon State team that was 10th in the country this year, Sean, in sacks, before Notre Dame's like, okay, we're putting a first-time starter in the game. Mm-hmm. They're going to try. And, oh, by the way, you're probably going to have both of your starting offensive tackles. So this is going to be a big opportunity for Steve to go out there and win. And look, he's a guy that we have always heard has a lot of respect from his teammates. So I do believe at least that part will be good, because they'll want to play hard for him. But this adds a little bit of a much bigger unknown factor to this bowl game. Now, of course, Oregon State's going to have a different quarterback in the bowl game, but the difference is the guy that's going to be playing quarterback for Oregon State has actually played a decent amount. He started games in 2022. He started several games actually in 2022 and threw for over 1,400 yards and 9 touchdowns last season. So even though they're going to have a new starter as well, their guy is not as talented as Steve Angeli, but he's far more proven than Steve Angeli. So much different look, Sean. And you're not going to be able to just say, hey, let's just run the ball and get out of here. You know what I mean? Because you don't know what your offensive line is going to look like now in this bowl game. You don't know if you're going to have 100 guys to in this bowl game. So it just makes it very, very interesting. But Steve Angeli is going to get his shot to go out there and show, hey, I have the tools to be taken seriously. Whether Riley Leonard comes in or not, whenever that time comes, I've got the tools to be taken seriously as a quarterback. That doesn't mean he has to go 28 of 30 for 495 yards and 5 touchdowns. He just has to show himself, hey, I can make the throws, I can make the plays that can lead this team to high peaks. Yeah. And we're going to see what he has to offer, man.
One of the interesting things is Steve Angeli, in my opinion, has grown. I won't give a measure, but he's grown as a quarterback since I watched him in the spring. It's evident to me, just watching him play in the limited snaps in the regular season. From the guy I saw in the spring, Justin Shells, and some of the other things, like, okay, this kid is playing with it. Seems like he's playing with a different level of confidence than what I saw in the spring. Now, who do you attribute that to? Is that Gino Gaduli? Is that the kid himself that's putting in the work? Hey, we pointed out Sam Hartman wasn't really given the ability to make checks. Steve Angeli was going into games making checks. So you feel confident about his knowledge.
And not even knowing if he actually had the ability if he was allowed to, but he's like,
right,
I'm doing it.
Hey, noted, right? So that gives you confidence going into this bowl game. Like, okay, he knows the offense. Like, one thing we know is that he knows the offense and he has the ability to do this. Now, everything else that's surrounding him, that's a big question mark. How will it affect him? How will it affect his performance? We'll see. But one thing that strikes me, he's never going into any moment, whether regular season or the spring games we've seen him in, even, the touchdown going back to the end of the spring game, his first year. Like, the kid just goes in and plays. He's never walked into a situation that seems like he's rattled.
Right.
he goes in, he might not make the right throw, do the right thing, but he's not rattled. That's calming for everybody else in the offense. And I think that's going to bode well in the bowl game. So I'm looking very much forward to watching him play. And like you said, I hope they do have a plan for Kenny Minchey to get some game experience in the bowl game as well.
Yeah.
So I think the positive is from what I saw in the spring to what I've seen now in the regular season, I've seen improvement in Steve Angeli. And so, that's a good thing. I'm with you as far as like, forecasting whether or not he can be that guy. I'm not there yet.
Right.
However, he has improved, Notre Dame fans. So
Well, sure. I mean, you would hope any player can improve the longer he's in a system. I think the one thing that Sean is, you can call it improvement, but the reality is we saw this from Steve the first time we ever saw him play. Is for all the issues I have about his limitations as a player and his lack of ball placement, whatever, and just solid player, can be a starting quarterback at the Power 5 level, but is he a guy that's going to lead Notre Dame to the title? I have major doubts. The one thing he showed from the minute he got here, I think, is the biggest thing you said. He does not get rattled. I mean, now could it change in the bowl game? Sure, but because we haven't seen him in that situation. But I just think back to his freshman year in the blue gold game, and again, it's just a blue gold game. But the kid comes out there and it's like, oh, we need a game-winning touchdown. All right, cool, no problem. And just cool and calmly collected, just let him down there, made some throws, made some plays with his legs. Obviously, runs it in for a touchdown. The kid has got a lot of, he's got a lot of confidence in himself. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Like, he's just a very confident kid. Like, hey, Driscoll may think I suck, but I know I don't suck. And I don't think he sucks. I'm being hyperbolic. You get the point that I'm making. That kid thinks he can play and play at a high level. And they're just, those moments just don't seem to get to him from what we've seen so far. I didn't think he played well in this year's spring game, but it wasn't from a lack of him being rattled, or it just, I didn't think he played well. I thought they were going against a pretty good defense, and then you looked at him in games this year, Sean. I mean, he had that bad turnover against Stanford, but I don't think it was a moment was too big. So he just made a bad read and a bad throw and wasn't quite on the same page with Jaden Greathouse, right?
And that happens to everybody.
Happens to veterans. It'll happen. Yeah. It happened to Sam Hartman. It'll happen to whoever your next quarterback is. It wasn't like see, I knew it. He sucks. It wasn't like that kind of play. It was like, it happens, like, learning process. But like you said, when he did come in the game, he showed poise. He showed the ability to get the ball where it needed to go to. And he showed that he's got some decent arm talent. I mean, the throw he made to Cooper Flanagan was a really good throw. It wasn't like oh my God, that's like a Pat Mahomes throw, but that was not an easy throw. No. An accurate throw on a corner route, outcut, throwing to your left as a right-handed quarterback, is running to your left as right-handed quarterback. It's not an easy throw.
No.
And he hit it right on the money. So you hope that he can carry that into the bowl game, because, again, I don't care who sits out. Notre Dame needs to win this bowl game. They need to win this bowl game. And Steve Angeli is going to get his chance to kind of audition for that spot. And, yes, we anticipate Notre Dame having a transfer quarterback that's going to be considered the guy. But I can promise y'all right now, if another quarterback is consistently just the better player, then Notre Dame's going to go with the guy that gives them the best chance to win.
Yeah.
And if that's Steve Angeli, it's Steve Angeli. But it's more so, Sean, about Steve Angeli positioning himself to say, hey, I know Kenny Minchey's really good and highly ranked, and I know CJ Carr's a 5-star, and I know Deuce Knight's a 5-star, but hey, guys, I'm going to be the guy to beat when we get into the 2024 offseason, 25 offseason, for the 25 season.
Yeah.
And this game can earn him a lot of cachet, Sean, in that regard, because you feel better about, hey, this is who our backup quarterback might be next year.
Yeah.
So, and if he doesn't play well, then that opens up a window for Kenny Minchey or CJ Carr to step in and say, hey, I'm going to be the backup quarterback next year. It'd be the guy that comes in if a new starter's needed.
And you know what else I'm interested in watching, Brian? Which, if I could guess right now, I think this probably is the case. I think he has a lot of respect amongst the players.
Oh, there's no doubt. Yeah. I mean,
and see, that goes a long way as well. Regardless of whether or not he's the guy in 24 or he ends up being the backup, you need guys like that players on both sides of the ball both sides of the ball look at it and say, yo, we respect that dude. Like, he's a
Mhm.
dude. He can be a voice. He can be a leader, and this program going into next season will be very inexperienced and more than likely looking for leaders in the offseason. So to see how the players around him, you talked about everything and all of the question marks on the offensive line and other areas going into this game. Well, guess what? If those guys step up and say, yo, we can't let Steve down. We're not about to allow Steve to look bad in this game.
Right.
Let's go.
100%.
That showed that's huge. That's huge going into 2024. So it almost reminds me of kind of the attitude that Notre Dame team had going into that LSU game in 2014, where it was like, okay, we're hearing all this stuff, the sky is falling, all of that.
It kind of was.
See?
Kind of was. I mean, but to your point, they had lost to Northwestern at home.
Yeah.
They'd lost to Louisville at home. They got absolutely obliterated by USC.
Mm-hmm.
They went from number 5 team in the country to they sucked.
Mm-hmm.
And the sky kind of and I think there's only 2 people on the entire beat that predicted Notre Dame to win that bowl game against LSU. It was me and Jake Brown, who at the time I think was working for Scout, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. Everybody else predicted Notre Dame to lose, and a lot of people predicted them to lose big. And so yeah, there was a legit, like a real legitimate sky is falling thing, because it kind of was. It kind of was.
But this is a very great opportunity to galvanize the program going into next season. Because that game and the preparation for that game and the leadership in that moment of a guy that was very much respected in Cam McDaniel and the all players meeting they had kind of propelled everybody into that next season. And that 2015 season, even though it didn't end up, meeting the expectations that a lot of us had for that team, it really set up a great season, regardless of what the outcome was.
They
That was
reached
a
their
really
full
good
potential
team.
for a Brian
Yeah.
Kelly coach team.
Yeah. So this is a great opportunity, and I want to see how the rest of the players rally around Steve Angeli. That's what I'm very interested.
And the interesting thing is, because there's a lot of, I mean, it's a little harder now, I think, than it would have been in a normal situation. Like, let's say Sam had gotten hurt, because, Tosh Baker can't be worried about, I'm going to play better for Steve. Tosh Baker's got to be worried about, I got to do my job. Emil Wagner's got to worry about, I got to do my job, right? Whoever the running backs are, I got to do my job, because they're now in a similar situation where they're kind of being thrust into role. So, so everybody's going to have to kind of be on top of their game for this one, Sean. And it's going to be interesting. And look, I'll say this. I've made my opinion on Steve Angeli very clear of what I think of him as a player. He's just one of those kids you have a lower opinion on relative to what? Like going and winning a championship at Notre Dame. He is better than guys who started football games at Notre Dame. Several of my lifetime, right? I mean, Steve Angeli on that 07 team when Jimmy Clausen was hurt would have been a huge upgrade. Right. Steve Angeli on that, what was the year, the 02 team, once Carlisle got hurt, is a huge upgrade over a Pat Dillingham. You know what I mean? Like, this kid's a good football player. But I've made my opinion very clear. However, he's just one of those kids, Sean, that I'm hoping that he makes me look bad for my opinion of him. He's just an easy kid to root for. Because he does have some of that swagger to him. You know what I mean? Like, he has some of that it that you look for. He just doesn't have necessarily the physical gifts that other guys that you want that it from. You know what I mean? Like, when I watch Steve Angeli throw, it's like, oh, he throws a nice ball. When I watch Kenny Minchie throw before game, I'm like, oh, man, that's impressive, right? I mean, when we used to, even going back to, was it 2011? You'd watch Everett Golson in pregame, and it's literally like, I'm not paying any attention to Dane Christ. I'm paying zero attention to Tommy Reese. I'm just watching the kid I know is not playing in this game throw to football, because it was just different. I mean, it was just like watching him throw to football, watching Ev throw to football in pregame of 2011 was like, man, this guy can spin it really impressively. And that's how Kenny is, right? But then you look at Steve, and it's just like he doesn't have that. He does, but it's just he's just you love the swagger, you love the attitude, you love the moxie. He's got all those intangibles, and you kind of hope that he does prove me wrong a little bit, because it's going to be good for Notre Dame if he does. And so I'm curious to see what Steve can do in the game.
And
So
I say it all the time, Brian. We can sit up here, watch film, break down, forecast. It comes up to the kid, man.
well, and there's only so much the film can tell you about this
Yeah,
and this.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
we've seen quarterbacks on film like this guy's got $1 million arm, he's athletic, he's this, and then you watch him playing college football, and you're like, this kid is not a real smart football player, or this kid has no heart. Like, you get any kind of pressure on this $1 million arm kid, and he's going to fold.
yeah.
Right. And then there's that kid that just like Aiden O'Connell. How the freaking heck is Aiden O'Connell in the NFL and none of Notre Dame's talented quarterbacks over the last 10 years in the NFL? Right. Well, number one, he was developed well. And number two is
Right.
he just got it here.
Yeah,
He's got it here. I mean, with all due respect to some other people that want to talk about, Brock Purdy. I always knew Brock Purdy was really no, you didn't. You didn't think Brock Purdy is going to be this, because Brock Purdy isn't an elite talent. He's not in the same universe as Pat Mahomes and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow physically, but he's got it here and he's got it here, right? And Jalen Hurts doesn't have the God-given throwing ability that Kyler Murray does, but Jalen's got it here and Jalen's got it here, right? And that could go on and on and on. And that's the one thing that you see in Steve is he's got it here and he's got it here. And I do think he has more talent than like Drew Pine, for example. There's no knock on Drew, but I mean, Steve, to me, again, you talk about what Notre Dame could go out next year with Steve Angeli as starting quarterback and win 9-10 games.
Oh, I will put the over under at 10.
I'd say 9.5.
Yeah,
would be what it'd be for me with next year's schedule.
Yeah,
but it's just I said the same about Drew. I mean, you could have gone out there last year and won 9-10 games with Drew Pine as your starting quarterback all year.
Yeah,
because if Drew Pine was your starting quarterback all season, maybe you beat Marshall, because he would have been a little bit more, okay, he's a little bit more experienced than Tyler was, whatever the case may be. You still lose to Ohio State. Maybe you go 9-3 instead of 8-4. I don't know. But he just wasn't going to elevate you. And that's going to be my question on Steve is, can he elevate? And that's what he's going to have to prove.
And that is something that is very important, because you brought up Brock Purdy. Hey, December 28th, 2019, I wasn't impressed with Brock Purdy at the Camping World Bowl.
Right.
I
mean, he was overwhelmed by a much better football team. But
I'm sitting there watching that game like, there's no way this dude is about to go into the NFL. But look, once again, who is he playing with as well? He's playing. He struggled. And when did he struggle this year? When his left tackle and his number one option weren't playing due to injury. He struggled. So that lets you go. That puts him, so you already know who he is as a quarterback. Like, he needs these things in place. There are other great quarterbacks that can elevate above not having a starting left tackle, not having your number one option. Heck, we just watched Patrick Mahomes lose his number one option last year to Miami and win the Super Bowl. So there are guys that can elevate.
Right.
And that's what you're saying. You don't know if Steve Angeli can be that guy.
It didn't matter who John Elway's receivers were, or who his tight ends were, who his running backs were. I mean, John Elway went through different running back every year. I mean, Sammy Winder, Gerald Wilhite, Melvin Bratton, Bobby Humphrey. I mean, it just was like, until Terrell Davis, it was just like recycling some running back no one else wants. Gerald Green, you know what I mean? Like, or Gaston Green. It just was like, but guess what? They were always still going to Super Bowls. Why? Because John Elway, right? I mean, that's the reality of it. So those are the guys you obviously want, but there aren't a lot of guys like that. And we're going to see if Steve Angeli can make the throws and lead this team the way they need to go get a win, because they need it. They absolutely need it. Final topic, Sean. We're just going to briefly talk about this. Some more All-American lists came out today.
Yeah.
Audric Estime and Howard Cross were named second-team All-Americans by I believe they were AP All-Americans. Howard Cross was also a second-team Football Writers Association of America. And Xavier Watts and Joe Alt earned 2 more All-American honors today. Football Writers Association of America and the AP both released their first All-American teams, and Joe Alt and Xavier Watts both made first team. Joe Alt has now been named a first-team All-American by Football Writers, the AP, CBS Sports, USA Today, Pro Football Focus, and there's one other, Walter Camp. Xavier has been named a first-team All-American by all those same outlets except Pro Football Focus. He wasn't even second team because those people aren't to be taken seriously. Here's the interesting thing, Sean. The last three that have come out are Walter Camp, Football Writers Association of America, and the AP. Those are three of the five that go into, do you make a consensus or unanimous All-American list? The way those work is, and I'm pretty sure I'm finally right on this, if you're a consensus All-American, you have to be first team on three of the five, the other two being the AFCA, American Football Coaches Association All-American team, and then the Sporting News. You have to be a first-team All-American on three of them to be consensus All-American. To be unanimous All-American, you have to be first team on all five. So with Xavier Watts and Joe Alt being Football Writers, AP, and Walter Camp, they are now going to end up being consensus All-Americans. They both still have a shot also to be unanimous All-Americans. The last unanimous All-American for Notre Dame was Jeremiah Wusu-Koromo in 2020, and I believe the previous one before that was Quentin Nelson. So it's not easy. It just takes one person to have you second team, and you're not unanimous. So quite an honor for both of those kids, no doubt. And I'm loving the fact that Howard Cross is getting so much attention. I honestly, I said, I think a month ago we were asked about All-Americans, and I was like, I don't see Howard Cross being named an All-American because he doesn't have the production. That was my sense of, look, the film was great, but these people look at numbers. He's now been a second-team All-American on four different outlets. Pro Football Focus named him one today, both of them today. So Football Writers, and there was one other, I can't remember which the other one was, but he's now been named second-team All-American on four different outlets. That's awesome for that kid because he had a heck of a year, and I just assumed, clearly wrongly, that it was going to get overlooked because he didn't have – he had 6 tackles for loss and 1 sack.
Yeah.
Right? And over half of those tackles for loss came against Duke. Didn't have a lot of tackles for a D tackle, 62, but I just kind of assumed that he was going to get overlooked a little bit, Sean. And I'm so happy that I was wrong on that because he's getting a lot of recognition. And of course, Howard announced yesterday that he plans to return to Notre Dame in 2024.
You know what this makes me feel good about? That these publications seem to have some football people in the building rather than just journalists, or at least they're lending their ear to football people when they're making these picks and, announcing these teams. Because like you said, you have to look deeper than the numbers with Howard Cross. We would talk about Howard Cross just about every week. And remember when it was a big deal when he didn't play well? That's when you know that you've raised the level of expectations and raised your level of play. When people talk about when you don't show up and play well. And that's what he did. And I love his story, man, because he's very similar to Steve Angeli, in my opinion, in a lot of ways, and the way people look at Steve Angeli now. I think a lot of people looked at Howard Cross and said, you know what? His size and everything and all these things we think can be limitations. They're like, well, I think he can be a good player. But then when he took that next step, it was like, whoa. And who is to say he can't take another step next year?
Right.
And become an even better player. And now become
especially if Riley Mills comes back.
Yeah.
And he can improve his game.
Yeah.
That's going to give Howard even more opportunities to make more plays on the football, which, potentially more tackles for loss, more sacks, and those type of things.
Yeah. But like you just said previously about in our last segment, can't measure it. You can't measure it. And, with everything that is seen, everything that's seen as a limitation to everybody else, obviously he doesn't give a darn about it. And I'll give you this one thing that stuck out to me. I'll never forget after the, and I think it goes to why he probably came back. After the Louisville game, the fans are storming the field. And I think something that happened with one of the players, Notre Dame players, walking off the field, that had to kind of be broken up. But you saw Howard Cross stand there and watch Louisville celebrate.
Yeah. And as all his players walked by him. Like,
Yes.
I'm going to be, you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me, you ever see the movie We Are Soldiers
Yeah.
with Mel Gibson? He's like,
Mhm.
I'm always going to be the first man on and the first man off the battlefield, right? It's kind of
Mhm.
like that thing, like, I'm standing here until I know all my team is, but also that moment of, I don't like how this feels.
Because that's when he realized, like, man, we're probably out of the football playoffs
Right.
with this loss. And
Right.
he was just like, okay, all right. And like he had moments where you can point to on the film against Clemson where it's like, early on, but then that second half,
Right.
you watch him play and it's like, okay. So yeah, he's undersized. Yeah, it might be some other things, but this kid, man, he just makes plays. He makes if football had an assist stat, you know how you get like the
Mhm.
double assist in hockey, like the guy that passed it to the guy that passed it to the guy that scored. If you had that in defensive line play, Howard's cross stats would probably look even more
Well,
impressive than they
actually,
look.
Sean, this is the one thing that look, everybody serves a purpose, right?
Hmm.
And I don't like the fact that Pro Football Focus does their grades stink and some of the other things are just like, dude, what are you doing? But as I said before, they're very good with data collection, and that's why I like their pass rush numbers,
Hmm.
because Howard Cross had one official sack this season, right? I think that's wrong. I know I'm pretty sure he had at least one other that I can remember him getting off the top of my head, but Notre Dame stat people made a lot of mistakes, and I sent something to him like they had Aldrich Estime's numbers wrong. He actually gained more yards in the game than they gave him credit for. Different story for a different day. But they make too many mistakes like that. But Pro Football Focus has him down with 36 pressures. So yeah, even though he only had one or two sacks, he was constantly. So there was sacks that Javonte Jean Baptiste got, that Riley Mills, that the linebackers got, that the defensive ends got. That you're like, man, Howard was the guy that made that play. He didn't get a sack, but he's the guy that had that pressure against Tennessee State that resulted in the quarterback throwing off his back foot, which allowed Ramon Henderson to go get a pick. There were a lot of plays like that. And you know what Howard showed me too at times this year is, we're talking about, you need that guy that can step up in a money situation, make a play. And he did that at times. I think of the Duke game, just people forget, like, Duke had the ball again. They could have gone down, and I mean, they didn't have a lot of time left, but there was still like 30 seconds left in the game. And I believe they had at least one timeout left. So I look at it and it makes me kind of say, hey, look, this kid has a chance to maybe be that stopper you need next season. And if they can get Riley Mills back as well, this team has a shot to be really good up front. Really good up front.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And these are we know the 5 stars, we know the first round picks. But at the core of college football, man, the Howard Crosses are what make college football great.
Mm-hmm.
They really are. The Steve Angeli
Because
and
it's not
what
about this for him. It's not
no.
about I'm coming back to be a first. I'm 6 foot, 280 pounds. I am people. Why is he coming back? He's not going to improve his draft stock next year. Some of you all don't realize for some kids, it's not about that.
Mm-mm.
Howard Cross knows I'm 6 foot, 280 pounds. The odds of me going to the NFL and being the next Aaron Donald are not very high. This is my last chance to go play ball at the amount I'm going to play. But some kids just love playing the game, and they love playing it at a certain place. Howard Cross clearly loves being at Notre Dame. Otherwise, he'd go into Portland and go play somewhere else for his final season, which he could easily do. But the kid just loves playing a game. And you need guys like that. Now, of course, you also need your first-round draft picks and your A-level talents and all those kind of things. But you also need those guys that are just like, that guy is just you mentioned it earlier, Sean. There's nothing special about Howard Cross size-wise. Athletic. He's a good athlete. He's not super powerful like Aaron Donald. It's just like, you're like, there's not one physical trait you can point to and say, yeah, that's why that guy's really good. It's just a football player. It's just a football player.
Mm-hmm.
And I always kind of thought he'd be like a good rotation player at Notre Dame, but he's far outplayed what I thought it could do. And here's
Yeah.
the thing, it's not one of those things where like he flashed for like 4 or 5 games
Yeah.
and then faltered, so it doesn't project. He was good all year, Sean. I mean,
Yeah.
there was a game here, game there. He wasn't dominant, but like he was
Yeah.
just good all year. And that's why you say that can be repeated,
Mm-hmm.
right? Some guys can just get hot for 4. You see it in baseball, especially like a guy has a great month and then he just never replicates that. Like remember Brady Anderson, that 150 home run season, never
Yeah.
sniffed it again,
Never
right?
again.
Right. But when you're just consistently good, and that's what Howard has really been the last 2 years, is he was good last year. This year he raised it to another level.
Right.
And now, do I think there's another level for him as far as his level of play? No, I don't.
But
But
he's
the
beneficial.
production can get better. That's
Mm-hmm.
what can get better, Sean.
Yeah.
Not so much, he's so much quicker this year and he's so much
Yeah.
stronger this year. That's not really going to change a whole lot.
Yeah.
But anytime you get more and more experience, it's the savviness, hey, I've now played a bunch more snaps. I know now how to close off this particular play, where last year I got a pressure, but I didn't close off the football.
Mm-hmm.
The technical part,
Yeah.
that the experiential part, those things can result in better production. And that's that's what Howard.
And that is, look, we talked about it with the wide receiver room, Brian. Howard Cross is going to pay dividends for Sean Sevillano Jr. Like, can you how much it means to have that big guy walk in and have Howard, just watch Howard Cross work. Just watch him work. Because he doesn't have the size you have. He probably doesn't have the same aspirations you have as the NFL. But you know what? Watch him work. Watch
who I think is going to have the biggest, who's going to benefit the most from that, are the 2 freshmen.
Mm-hmm.
Devin Houston and Armel Mookum getting a second year of watching how Howard goes about his business every day is going to be huge for them, in my opinion. Absolutely huge for them. Because I told you this, Sean, I think it was a Wake Forest game when Devin got in late. You're just like, all right, that kid moves different. Yeah, that kid's different. Like he's not ready yet. And he missed missed the spring and all that.
Yeah.
His time will come if he can be patient. But you look at Devin, you're like, hey, man, that kid's got a chance to be special. So if he can learn some of the how to be a pro, basically at this level, from a guy like Howard and hopefully Riley Mills. I mean, that's how you leave your mark, Sean.
Yes.
And that's something that like Quentin Nelson took real seriously. I'm not just leaving my mark by the level of play that I have as a player. I'm leaving my mark on what I leave as far as what the expectations are for playing this position, playing the game of football. And so if me doing what I do, helps Robert Haynes be better, helps Liam Eichenberg be better, helps Aaron Banks be better down the road, and we can continue this tradition, that's me leaving my mark beyond just what I do on the field. And Howard Cross certainly has a chance to do that. There's no doubt about it. So that's going to do it for the topics we're going to discuss today, Sean. We're going to hop into the mailbag next. But before we do, folks, I'd ask a huge, huge favor. Give us a like, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. And we would greatly appreciate if you're listening via podcast platform to give us a 5-star review. And as always, sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So, Sean, are you ready to jump into these questions? We have 2 super stickers from Tom Connor. Tom, I appreciate that very, very, very much. And we have a few more super chats we'll get to here first, Sean.
Full House Backfield, thank you for the super chat. I don't get to watch live often, but you guys help me realize that in some ways, the non-playoff bowls are more of a preseason game. If fans look at it this way, it may reduce angst. It has for me.
Yeah, we talked about this last week, Sean, and I did this in my midweek rundown last week. I said, look, we've got to, and this is like, sometimes you give advice to yourself first, then you give it to other people, or you're giving your advice to yourself and then sharing that advice to other people. And that's kind of what I did last Wednesday, which is we've got to rethink how we view bowl games. And because it went from it was the best time of the year to where none of them matter unless it's a playoff game. And I remember watching Ohio State a few years ago, having all these kids opt out of the freaking Rose Bowl, and I'm just like disgusted by it. And I'm like, and so none of them matter. Well, that's not the way to look at it now with the realities of the sit-outs is it's not a end of the previous season. It's not a complete preview of the next season, but it does give us a chance to kind of get a glimpse into the future in ways that we couldn't in the past in bowl games. And so while I wouldn't call it a preseason game, I do believe there is some sort of, we have to rethink the way in which we view it. And so in that regard, I think Full House Backfield is onto something. We have to have a shift in focus to properly appreciate what bowl games are. And instead of saying, well, it's not like it was when we were younger, which makes me sad, because I think bowl season was phenomenal, and younger people don't really appreciate it the way that you and I did. I mean, where for like 4 or 5 days, I did nothing. So like from December 27th to like January 2nd, just don't bother me. Like seriously, like don't bother me. I'm doing nothing but watching bowl games. And especially January 1st. It is what it is, right? But if we can reshift our focus, then I think we can enjoy it a lot more. Like, okay, well, Joe Alt's not playing. Why should I care? Like I had somebody say, well, I'm not going to pay money to go to a bowl game, and all these guys sitting out. And I'm like, so you're going to punish the guys who are staying by not going to the game? Right. But if you rethink, hey, this is my first chance to see, what Steve Angeli can look like a quarter. It's my first chance to see perhaps, what Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price backfield might look like. This is my first chance to see, what the Jaden Mickey, Christian Gray cornerback room might look like moving forward. This is my first chance to see, what can Emil Wagner do replacing Blake Fisher, right? There's just a lot of things in that regard, Sean, where you say, if you can change your focus, then I think we'll have a greater appreciation for what these games mean. Now, that doesn't mean that I care less about winning.
Yeah.
That never changes. Just more about, instead of it being so much a cap on the end of this season, it's partly that record-wise, but how the game is played and what we see is more of it's our first glimpse into what the next season might be.
I can simplify this for you, Brian. As two married men, just recognize that you're married to Notre Dame football. And in doing so, you know what? The majority of the time, there's no purpose to arguing, because you're going to end up doing what she asked you to do anyway. So you can sit up here, oh man, watch the game. Trust me, we'll all be watching the Sun Bowl at the same time. Like, we sit up here and have these debates and arguments, but we'll all watch the game. We'll all have something to say. We'll all be happy and tweeting and on the after post game show talking about how happy we are they got the 10 wins. So what are we really talking about? As a fan, you're married to Notre Dame football, and you deal with all the angst, all the frustration. At the end of the day, when they play, wherever they play, you'll be there and you'll be watching. It just admit it. You're in love. It's okay.
There's nothing wrong with it.
There's nothing wrong with it. It's par for the course, right? I understand what you're saying. It's not the same, but it doesn't change. Heck, my wife doesn't look the same the first day I met her, and I definitely don't look the same. It's like, that's life. Things change as you move on, especially in relationships. And, as a fan of Notre Dame football, things will continue to change. But you're locked in. So enjoy it, man. Just enjoy it.
We have another one from Full House Backfield, Sean.
Maybe not necessarily from a playing style, unless you tell me different, but instead, from a potential freshman impact perspective, how does KVA stack up against Anthony Hill Jr.?
Well, if Kingston gets the opportunity to play as a freshman, it could be very similar production-wise. They're different players stylistically. They're different strengths. Anthony Hill, to me, is more about athleticism and those type of things, and he is just about super, super savvy. That'll come in time. I mean, he's a freshman, where Kingston kind of arrives with a little bit more savviness to him. Anthony Hill is also an attacking football player. Man, like 5 sacks this year. Kingston's more of a pure Mike, a pure inside linebacker. Not old school, but a modern pure inside linebacker. I think Anthony Hill had like 60, 70 tackles, something like that. I could easily see Kingston being that kind of player as a true freshman. Easily. The difference is Anthony Hill didn't have a Drake Bowen in front of him and a Jaden Alsbury and a Jalen Sneed. So I don't know that the opportunity to play that much will be there. Kind of like, when Manti was a freshman. I mean, Manti eventually kind of got that opportunity and produced. But so as far as freshman impact perspective, in my opinion, Kingston has every bit the ability to impact the game that much if he wins the job. There's no doubt. It would look different, and that's why I like that he said not from a playing style standpoint, which is a great way of phrasing that, by the way, to help, because otherwise we'd have just started comparing how their skill sets are different, right? But as far as impacting the game, there's no reason he can't be that kind of player. Now, it's going to be challenging for him to be that because he's got to beat out Drake Bowen. And I didn't even mention Nolan Ziegler if he's able to come back and get himself back on track.
That video he put out of him on the treadmill, I was so happy to see him going hard, looking like he's, in great shape physically, but more than that, just mentally. Just in a really good place. So I'm looking forward to watching that young man in all season in the spring.
There, Sean.
Oh, absolutely.
Keanu Kia comes back off mission. I mean, there's a lot. The path to being that kind of freshman impact player is going to be a lot more challenging for Kingston than it was for Anthony Hill. The minute Anthony Hill stepped on campus, he was the best, by far the most talented linebacker in that room.
Yeah,
by far. Kingston's in the conversation for being the best linebacker in the room. It's not a given by any stretch because Drake Bowen has a thing to say about that. Jaden Alsbury's going to have a thing to say about that. Jalen Snead's going to have a thing to say about that. Nolan Ziegler's going to have a thing to say about that, right? So, but that's also a great thing for Notre Dame that he doesn't just walk in the – like, I can't think of a single freshman outside of maybe Cam Williams because he's so different from everybody else. And maybe Gearby Lambert if you project Jagasol inside.
Yeah.
I can't think of another freshman in what you and I view as an outstanding recruiting class that just walks in the door and he's like, I'm better than everybody in this room, which we've seen a lot of recently. Let's be honest, because those guys are such unicorns. But and that's not an indictment of the 24 class. That's praising what the current roster looks like.
There's a misconception amongst fan bases across college football to whereas we follow these kids for 2 years, right? Like Notre Dame fans will start locking in on the 26 kids in the spring. And they'll read every article and latch on to their films and latch on to their games. And 2 years of just anticipation when they finally commit and get there. The anticipation is so high that it's like you almost expect these, like, okay, when are we going to see this kid? And it's like, yo, your best programs, you just don't walk in as a freshman. I don't care how good you are. You don't walk in and just be that guy. You just don't. Like, look at Dallas Turner this year in his third year. He started getting playing time towards the end of his freshman year and flashed a little bit. But he didn't walk in and just become the guy, right? And that's what you get when you become an elite program. So don't be disappointed if Kingston doesn't walk in. If he doesn't walk in and immediately get playing time, that doesn't say anything about who he is. He's not a disappointment. That means your program has gotten to the point where the talent is really that good, where the best of the best from your previous class has to wait their turn. If Cam Williams doesn't immediately pop, every now and then you will get a Kyle Hamilton. Every now and then you will get a Caleb Downs from Alabama. But heck, Keon Keeley didn't see the field.
Hardly at all. And that doesn't mean
he's a bust.
Right. Exactly. Because there's dudes in front of him. Right.
Absolutely.
I mean, you've told the story about how Bryce Young shows up as the number one player in the country and he's got to sit. Why? Because there's a first round draft pick who's a senior in front of him. That's kind of part of the deal. So but Kingston is a very talented player.
Absolutely.
Very talented player.
Absolutely. But temper expectations because in my opinion, the talent level is increasing on the Notre Dame roster. So as you get these talented kids in, yes, an elite program should find a way to get the best guys on the field.
Kingston needs to play next year. Sean.
Absolutely.
He needs to play next year. I'll be saying the same things about him next year that I said about Drake Bowen this year, that he should have played more. You should have used him in the rotation more. I would imagine if you're younger, there might be more emphasis on maybe a deeper rotation since you'll be younger next year, but we'll have to see how that plays out.
I'm Banani. Thank you for the super chat. Can you explain how ND transfers work? Oh boy, the ins and outs or reasons behind it. Heard Ryan say it's easier for kids with less credits or as a grad transfer. Obvious.
Well, it's I'll make it as simple as possible. I mean, it's very simple. Essentially, Notre Dame is not going to bring a kid into school that won't then be on pace to graduate. And if
Hmm.
you bring in a kid who's a third-year player and you don't accept over half his credits, he has no chance of graduating in a year and a half. He's going to lose 2 whole years of eligibility. A freshman, it'll be easier for him to transfer because a freshman is going to bring in because what happens essentially is they don't take the credits towards your major. Everything gets turned into electives. So they'll take all your classes, but they just all go towards electives, not your degree track.
Hmm.
And so what happens with a younger player, a freshman, even a second, maybe third semester sophomore, is you may only lose 5 classes that were towards your major. You can get back over the next 2 summers, essentially. So, but all those classes you took, they still take, but they send them to they put them towards your electives, which is fine. You're okay there because electives are just that. This is anything. There's certain things you just an elective. I took a poetry class in college. Why? I had no interest
Hmm.
in poetry. It seemed like it'd be easy, and boy, was I freaking wrong. That guy took his class way too seriously. But those are things that you do as you go through the process, Sean.
It's interesting for me because this is not just something that's exclusive to Notre Dame. If you go to most of your inner cities or cities around the country that have the best high schools, try to transfer your kid from one of the best public schools to one of the best private schools, and you're going to have the same issue. They're going to question. They might ask them to retest, to test into certain classes because they're not accepting this math class, they're not accepting that math class. It's about the best schools from an educational standpoint, having a higher bar. And then if you're coming from a school, like if you're coming from Northwestern, they respect that. If you're coming from a Harvard, okay, we have similar levels of education and classes. It's much easier to transfer some of those credits and courses. But if you're coming from like a public school or something like that, it's far more difficult. So that's not just college. You can go, man, elementary school, high school, that's just all around the country. When you elevate the level of education, yeah, it's going to be difficult to go ahead and keep what you already have as you transfer over. And it's going to make it more difficult, like Brian pointed out, to stay on track to graduate.
You got another one for my dad.
Another one. I love when we're let's see. I love where we're at right now compared to other coaches with about the same tenure. Napier, Benib, Cristobal, Heupel, Beamer, Thoughts, MF taking us to the ship.
Yeah. So what's that? Billy Napier at Florida, Brent Venables at Oklahoma, Mario Cristobal at Miami, Josh Heupel at Tennessee, Frank Beamer
Hmm.
at South Carolina. Well, I certainly like where Notre Dame is compared to Billy Napier at Florida. Marcus Freeman inherited a roster that didn't need nearly as much overhauling as Billy Napier's. So, I mean, that you have to recognize that. I don't think the roster is quite as good as people have made it out to be.
Hmm.
And if we are going to go back and look who inherited more first and second round draft picks, it would actually be Brian Kelly. Who inherited, Manti, Tyler Eifert, Kyle Rudolph. I mean, we could go down a long list of NFL guys that were already at Notre Dame when Brian Kelly arrived, but it was still a good roster. And some of these guys had to turn it over. I mean, look, I think I'm not a big Brent Venables fan. He did a nice job turning that team around this year. He did. I mean, I don't even think they were that great of a team, but they found ways to win
Hmm.
and went 10-2. After going 6-6 last year, I got to give him credit for that. And
Impressive win against Texas.
yeah, and had to learn how to win because people forget Quinn Ewers led Texas down on a go-ahead drive like with less than 2 minutes left.
And they came right back.
Came right back and scored, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and so I actually think they actually played above where they should have been. There's a couple games I'm like, they probably shouldn't have won that football game.
Hmm.
And Texas being one of them. And so props to the job he did this year. Now, is it sustainable? We'll find out. But, he did a nice job. Mario Cristobal is an interesting one, Sean, because what Mario Cristobal is doing on the field is a lot different than what he's doing on the recruiting trail.
Hmm.
And I'm not overly impressed with what he's done on the field so far this year. And you can say, well, they lost to Florida State and Louisville late in the year, but they were both touchdown games, and their last 3 losses were all to ranked teams, and that's all true. But it's like, but you're Miami, because that also gets bounced by the fact you lost at home to Georgia Tech, you lost at North Carolina, and yeah, you beat Clemson, but that was more about Clemson giving that game away than it was about Miami winning it. And so that's an interesting one, because recruiting wise, he's doing some really good things. Building a team, still a bit of a work in progress. I like what Josh Heupel's doing. I think the issue with Josh Heupel is his team peaked too early, and that caused him to lose a bunch of guys to the NFL that he otherwise wouldn't have lost if they were 8-4 last year, which is really where they should have been based on what he inherited. But he did a great job getting that team going. And I'll be honest with you, Sean, I was really impressed by the job he did this year, because I don't think Tennessee was very good. I don't think Tennessee has any business being ranked in the top 25. But it could have been a lot worse. It could have been a lot worse because of how much talent they lost this year. 8-4 record's not bad, and he's recruiting very well. They just landed a good pickup in the transfer portal in Holden Stace. That's a good pickup for Tennessee. Holden Stace is a good football player. He just was getting passed up by guys at Notre Dame.
And he's holding on to guys in the 24 class.
Correct.
That's key as well.
Yeah.
Holding on to a Caleb Beasley, holding on to a Edwin Spillman, guys like that.
Right. So those are good things. He's doing a nice job. Shane Beamer, that's a train wreck right now. I mean, that's a train wreck. Billy Napier, I think, is a good football coach. He has to do a better job with hires and fires, like Brian Kelly. We talked about that, and Marcus Freeman needs to prove. But the problem there is the toxic culture of the school, where guys not even a year and a half into his tenure, and they're talking about replacing him. It is people. This is what you fans don't. Not you fans. This is what we as fans don't understand. Is we can create a culture or an environment where it can be hard to win in that environment, because I have to go recruit, and these young people who live on Twitter see nothing but this guy sucks, that guy sucks, fire everybody. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to deal with that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how long the coach is going to be. Have you been? Now, that's not real life. I mean, that's not real life. That's not what, people, Ryan Day might get fired. Gene Smith is not firing Ryan Day because he lost to Michigan again. He's not. He may do it in a couple of years, but he's not. But you look at that and you're like, man, this is a very, very toxic situation. You'd think Ohio State went 8-4 this year, the way that some people talk about that football team. And so that's what's hurting Billy Napier down there.
Gene is retiring too.
Right. Well, and then whoever the new AD is not going to fire.
Right. But Gene wouldn't have the new AD coming in having to find a new guy.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying? Like, he wouldn't do that to the next guy.
Because he would have to hire the new coach.
Yes.
And to your point, he's not going to do that. Gene, yeah.
No.
So, but that's what we got. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't call a spade a spade. I mean, but it's just, it can just get like, dude, guy's a year and a half in his tenure and everybody's already given up on him. Like, come on, guys. Like, what are we doing here? So it makes it very hard to win. That's why I tell some of these, that's why you see more and more of these coaches like Jason Candle at Toledo. Look, man, I'm making $2 million a year. And if I have an 8-4, 7-5 year next year, because we're rebuilding, they understand. You take the Michigan State job and win a couple years in a row and then go 5-7 and see what happens. That's not even a big time job. By the way, Jonathan Smith is making some great hires, by the way, so far. Hiring Joe Rossi away from Minnesota was a phenomenal hire.
Man,
by the way.
That was impressive. I will say this, though. I do believe that, and it goes back to, people don't understand sometimes as fans, and even, I think we fall prey to it sometimes, is just expectations, right? And like you said, the season they had with Hendon Hooker, I'm sure Josh Heupel was tempted multiple times this year to play Nico.
Oh, yeah.
But he played the long game.
Right.
He said, no, I'm not messing up this young man's development. Right. I'll have him ready next year. I know it's plenty of times this year where he was like, man, look.
And he was able to get him in the game.
Yeah.
Like when they had some blowouts, he was still able to get him on the field. Kid threw 26 passes this year. So he got him in. Yeah.
Yeah. But like you said, yeah, the Beamer situation, train wreck.
That's a mess.
What Cristobal is doing from a, like you said, I actually like what he's doing, and this is his track record. He can really build nice offensive lines wherever
Oh
he
yeah,
goes.
because then they have like what 2 or 3 freshman
2 or 3
starters this
freshman
year.
starters,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's like he can build offensive lines. So that's his track record. His quarterbacks have been questionable, you know, and then his staff defensively has been questionable as
Mhm.
well. And now he's just really locking into like former Miami players, some NFL guys. Yes, Jason Taylor. So we'll see
And
how
that's what
that
you wonder
plays out.
is he making too many recruiting hires?
Yeah,
That's a question you have to ask a little
yeah.
bit, you know.
And then
But
lastly, this you're gonna like this because I can't wait to see how you respond to this. It's very interesting that Dylan Gabriel chose to hop in the portal because he would have been in his second year at Oklahoma and probably would have been better.
third
And
year at
they,
Oklahoma.
yeah, you're right. Third year at Oklahoma and probably would have been better. And on top of that, look, they had a lot of injuries late in the season at
Mhm.
wide receiver that hurt their offense. So I'll say this. Are they really in love with Jackson Arnold like that?
Yeah. We were
See
told
that?
we were told that they kinda forced
See,
Dylan
that's
out.
that's what I was leading into. Like,
Yeah.
really? Like, okay.
Like, they must I mean, maybe they don't view their team as being a championship contender next season, and they're just like, "Look, we're gonna get better because we think in 2025 we got a shot to be great," when our recruiting classes are now juniors and seniors. Perhaps that's it.
Hmm.
And honestly, if you truly look at your roster and you have look, guys, look, we'd have to get 7 or 8 big time impact portal guys at multiple positions. It's gonna cost us a lot of money for us to be even in the championship now we can, especially going to the SEC to be in the
Hmm.
championship conversation next year. So do we just, get some guys to make us competitive and then kind of roll into developing for the next year? I'm okay with Brent Venables being in that situation because he had to completely overhaul that roster because of how many
Hmm.
kids left when Lincoln Riley left. Now, the
Hmm.
other thing is the flip side is I wish Notre Dame was more on the same page of where Oregon and Washington were. I mean, because we're talking about younger coaches in the first, second, not younger, but early tenured coaches that Notre Dame's in a much better position than. I noticed you left off Oregon and Washington. Those are both second year coaches that are doing a phenomenal job. And that's where Coach Freeman needs to get to, is where you're maximizing. Like Washington got everything out of that football team and then some.
Hmm.
Where we're watching Notre Dame and we're like, how the heck did you lose to that team? How
Hmm.
did you lose to that team? How did you not make that play? Well, you know what? When Washington needed plays, defense and offense this year, somebody stepped up. And that's what great well-coached teams do with the right culture. And I don't know that right now Notre Dame has the right culture. Part of that's on the players in the locker room. Part of that's on Marcus Freeman and the coaching staff.
Hmm.
And that's going to be the biggest soul-searching aspect that Coach Freeman is going to have to do this offseason. It's not about getting a new portal quarterback and just keep doing what you're doing, but replace them with different players. There are other things that need to get fixed and corrected that are going to create the type of championship culture that is needed. That I don't believe that. I mean, I don't believe it's very clear from watching Notre Dame play on Saturdays that is not there where it needs to be just yet. And we'll see if we can get them there. Got a few more of these, Sean.
Randy Hernandez, thank you for the super chat. Brian, any plans for an IB meetup in El Paso? I'm looking forward to the Sun Bowl. I can't wait to hear this answer.
Yeah, we're going to plan something for that. Yeah, so I've heard a couple recommendations from people uh, that are places we can go. I'm going to start planning probably over the next week, making some calls and trying to find a place where we can meet up. Probably either the 27th or 28th. I haven't quite decided that yet. Got to look at my schedule, the Notre Dame schedule, but yeah, we'll do some kind of meetup.
What's easier in your opinion? Setting up a meetup at like a hotel where people already reside or somewhere like a bar or
We
restaurant?
always do like restaurants because
Okay.
not everybody's not always at the same hotel. People, I mean, some people are driving in from out of town, some people are local, some people are staying at hotels. But yeah, and the last two we've done, we did one in 2015 when I was at BGI. I did one with people there, and then we did one at the Fiesta Bowl 2 years ago, which was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun. So yeah, we'll do another one of those. It'll be good.
Arizona's always nice.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Man. Uh, TDD Grammy 4. How fast would you like the starting quarterback and wide receivers to be named to get the reps and chemistry for the season? And does the portal affect the timeline?
Yeah, the portal affects the timeline a little bit. But look, I don't think the quarterback situation is going to be the same as it was last year. The difference last year is you had a guy that in Tyler Buckner who had kind of already won the starting job before and who was coming off of a brilliant performance. Well, I shouldn't say brilliant. Outside of 2 plays was coming off a pretty brilliant performance in a bowl game.
Yeah.
And, so it was a little bit different than me. Even if Steve Angeli goes out and plays well in the bowl game, Notre Dame wins, he was a backup quarterback that hasn't played a lot of football. I mean, I know Tyler only started 3 games, but Tyler played a bunch of football his freshman year as well, on top of last year. So it's a different dynamic. I don't think. I mean, Notre Dame will give lip service to it, but nobody's buying that there's going to be it would have to be we're assuming he's the guy unless over the course of the time somebody just consistently outplays the guy or he really struggles. It's going to be a little bit of a different dynamic than it was last year, where Tyler Buckner deserved the right for it to be an honest competition. And I don't know that Steve Angeli or Kenny Minchie or CJ Carr will have earned that, in my opinion. Or not earned it, but earned is not the right word. Done enough to warrant that is probably a better way of saying it.
And look, this might sound crazy. People, it might sound crazy. Tyler Buckner did some things in spring practices, man. Like Tyler Buckner did some things in spring practices that made you feel like, oh, okay, this kid might be turning the corner. He really did, and it was a reason why he was highly touted coming out of high school. It's not like he didn't have skills, but for that to transfer to games and not to turn the ball over and things of that nature,
and just staying healthy. That was a big one.
And it's like, and like someone in the chat is like, we're talking about practice. That's where people earn playing time.
Right.
So you can't poo-poo practice.
Look, just because Allen Iverson said that doesn't mean it's an appropriate thought process, right? Allen Iverson's a unique player. First of all, don't get me started on Allen Iverson's attitude. But that's a different deal. That's an NBA veteran who was one of the greatest players of his generation. That's not true for 99.9% of people. It just isn't. So yes, practice matters in a big way. It's just going to be a different animal than it was last year.
What's the first thing that fans say when they see poor performance on the field? What are these coaches doing in practice? What are they doing? Right. It's like, so either practice matters or it doesn't, And like I said, that's one of the things, like we say all the time, like we can sit here, forecast, report what we see, what goes on. The heart can't be measured, and then the mind can't be measured. And like what we say, the moxie is something else that for a kid like Steve Angeli that might not look as pretty in practice, his moxie and his other abilities allow him to go into game atmospheres and kind of be very calming and perform and lead. And that is what football and life is all about. Like, there is no one way. I'm sure Max Duggan probably wasn't pretty in practice, but he was just moxie.
Yeah.
He was a
which
gamer.
Is why he got beat out.
Yes.
I mean, part of it was his injuries. I mean, he had some health issues and all that, but like that would have been a thing where when he came back, he would have gotten the job back. That's not what happened. That's not what happened. So yeah, it'd be interesting.
And then the guy that beat him out didn't really look that impressive this year.
Yeah, right.
What I'm saying? So
now he had a different team around him, but your point stands. Your point stands.
Brandon Plinson, thank you for the super chat. Is Brown receiving any other titles than wide receiver coach?
Not in the release. So in the release that we were given, it was just wide receivers coach. Now that doesn't mean things may not change at some point in time, but no, it was probably just a pretty decent pay bump and a chance to work with Marcus Freeman and be at Notre Dame as opposed to Wisconsin. But no, he He's coming. And the other thing too is like he's going to know the way that Jared Parker runs the offense, that he's going to want input and have guys be responsible for certain things. So whether you have a title or not, look, a lot of these titles, Sean, I mean, there's a level of trust that has to go into being an associate head coach, but the primary reason you can give a guy those duties and not give him a title.
Yeah.
The primary reason for those titles is a pay raise. Is to say, hey, I'm giving him a new title. We need to give him more money. That's what a lot of them come down to.
Terry McCauley, thanks for the super chat. With new president AD coming in and now a junior transfer coming in, can we now anticipate more opportunities with undergrad transfers? Is this a barrier to entry that is getting better? Either way, love B.
I don't know. I mean, Notre Dame has gotten a junior transfer before. I mean, like Notre Dame has gotten several undergrad transfers. Lloyd Gilman was an undergrad transfer. Brandon Joseph was an undergrad transfer. I don't know how many of these guys are undergrads. Like I wouldn't be shocked if Bo Collins was on pace to graduate.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be shocked, and there might be some plan in place to have him taking some courses remotely from Clemson next year as well to help him be. I don't know. But I know that Notre Dame is working on it. I don't know that the new president, new AD, I don't know what their views are on those things. I mean, for all I know, they may come in and want to crack down and have less of it. I have no clue.
Yeah.
No clue. So I'm hopeful that they're because here's the thing you have to balance. You have to balance what's best for the football team with what's best for these young men and the academic goals that Notre Dame has as an institution. And if you're just going to bring in a kid who's going to come in here for one semester, who doesn't care about getting his degree because he just wants to play football at Notre Dame, win a championship, go be a first-round NFL draft pick. Is that really staying true to the heart of who Notre Dame is? And I know some people don't want to hear that, Sean. Some people don't. I don't want to hear, I just want to win championships. Okay, that's fine, but you understand that's never going to be all it's about at Notre Dame, ever. And so you can continue getting pissed about it, but that's just who Notre Dame is, and I'm okay with that because I think this notion that, you can't be a great football player and care about other things. We should be encouraging more of that. To be honest, we should be chastising other schools for not promoting that type of culture, if we're going to be honest about it. But it is what it is. It's never going to be that way for Notre Dame. Does that mean that Notre Dame can't do more things to work with the school to make sure that these kids that maybe they do accept, hey, look, we don't have this direct class, but this kind of meets this requirement, and so we'll work with you on that? I think there should be more of that. I do think there should be more of that. And it does seem like they're doing a little bit more of that, depending on what the major is. But there's only so far Notre Dame can and should go in that regard. Like, I don't want Notre Dame bringing in mercenaries that aren't going to be leaving with degrees. I don't care about if a guy wants to come here for 2 semesters and not take his master's classes seriously. I don't care. I mean, I think you're silly.
You're foolish.
And foolish is a much better word, Sean. You're foolish, but you've got a degree. It is what it is. This is you've got your degree. Now I'm just trying to do something for myself athletically and for my chosen profession. That's fine. I don't like it. I think it's a missed opportunity. I think it's foolish, but it doesn't bother me. If you're going to come to Notre Dame and you don't have a degree yet, and you're going to act a fool and not go to class and do things you need to do, or you're not going to take it seriously to get, then I don't know that you have the temperament to thrive in the culture that is Notre Dame. That's my thing. I mean, you can say, well, it shouldn't be that way, but it is, and it always will be. Whether you like it or not, that's just how it's always going to be. And honestly, I think if you handle it the right way, I still say this again, I think it's a good thing. I think the best coaches in Notre Dame took the challenges that is Notre Dame and used it as fuel to create a far more mentally tough football team.
Yeah.
And Marcus Freeman's going to have to figure out how to do that.
Yeah. It's about relationships, B. You got to have relationships at every level across the program, across the university. That's it. If you build good relationships, now we can work together to make some things happen. Mark 1, thank you for the super chat. Good show. I think with 15 practices plus game will make us better with the players. Changes our team should be in playoffs at a minimum.
I mean, I can I just wait and see what the roster looks like before I start talking about what expectations for going to be next year. I mean, look, Notre Dame should always have a high standard. I just want to see the team get put together first.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple positions that need to get filled first before we kind of get into that. So we'll find out. And then this last super chat from Michael S. Will Brown coach the wide receivers in the bowl game? Yeah, we talked about that at the beginning of the show, Michael. He will be. As soon as once the hire's made official, the guy can start coaching.
He was not hiding last week, was he?
No.
He was spotted around town all week.
No. This is not at the top of the question, Sean, but I wanted to bring someone up because I think this is a really good question that kind of plays off of what we were just talking about what could or could not keep Notre Dame from being that type of playoff or better team next season.
Mm-hmm. Jason, we thank you for the super chat. Who on the 2024 team do you see being that tone setter? Anyone able to play that zippy Samardzija vibe that brings that confidence, swagger, and envy?
Piss and vinegar.
Okay. I was like, yo, I didn't know what that was.
I say that all the time.
What is that like? Is that like a Virginia Southern?
It's maybe, I don't know. Okay. It's like you're just full of piss and vinegar. It's like because it's really like like
got you.
Yeah. You got some nastiness too. You got some.
That was sting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the question that I have, Jason. I think that's something that was missing from this year's football team, and something that is part of. It's not the only reason. It's part of why this football team didn't play to its potential, is because they didn't have that guy that could challenge other players, could challenge coaches in the right way. They didn't have those guys that stepped up and say, hey, in games, like, hey, not only am I going to make that play at the end, but I'm going to set the tone to where we don't have to have that play at the end. I mean, I've talked about this all the time. You look at some of the best teams Notre Dame had, they had those guys. Just look from the Brian Kelly era. The 2011 team was not as talented, or the 2012 team was not as talented as the 2011 team. I mean, who were the only really newcomers that did anything in 2012? It was like what? It was Kavari Russell. Sheldon Day was a backup. That's about it. But they lost Michael Floyd. They lost Harrison Smith. They lost Darius Fleming. They lost Steve Filer. I mean, they lost some talented football players. But why was the 2012 team better? That team just had a different attitude, a different culture. You had guys like Manti and Capron Lewis Moore, Zeke Mata that would get in your freaking face if you weren't doing what you needed to do. But also were guys who went out there and performed at a high level, that played with that type of swagger you needed. You look at the 2015 team, you had guys like that, Will Fuller, Quentin Nelson, even as a young guy still had that. Malik as the leader of that team in the offseason. I've talked about this since 2015. That was a big part of why that team had that attitude, was the leader of that team. So even though Malik was hurt, he could still be in the locker room, get in people's face. He didn't have that in 2016, and then teams struggled. You didn't have, you had that Sheldon Day type of guy who could lead by example, but you also had guys on that 2015 team like Kavari Russell, who was kind of a yapper. He'd kind of get at you. Jalen Smith, Joe Schmidt. I mean, whatever you think of him as a player, Joe Schmidt had the kind of mindset that the guys wanted and needed. Like he would get you, he would get on you, he would do those type of things. The 2017 team with Quentin Nelson, I mean, flat out had that type of deal. There's plenty of guys like that. And then you look at other teams that had really a lot of talent. The 2019 team, tons of talent. But did that team really have that leader? I don't know that it did. The 2014 team, I don't know that it did. And so and this year's team flat out lacked that. Like, love Audric Estime, but can he really be that guy? I don't think that he can. It needed to be you needed it in the offensive line. You needed it at quarterback. You needed it somewhere else. Defensively, you had a lot of great kids that brought a lot of swagger. You had a little bit more of that on defense, but like next year is going to be different because Xavier Watts, if he comes back, has a different mentality. He couldn't be that guy this year because he was an unproven player. We didn't know for sure if he was going to start. We knew he was going to play a lot. Benjamin Morrison's still young. He's still a sophomore. And Howard Cross was really going to his first full year as a full-time starter. So now some of those guys that have that swagger are now going to be leaders on defense next year. So I'm more optimistic we're going to see it on defense. Drake Bowen may be a sophomore, But if he's starting next year, Sean, he's got a different, with all due respect to JD, who's a great kid, did some great things in Notre Dame, and Marist, Drake Bowen is just a different cat. You've got to know him a little bit differently. Even as a sophomore, he's going to have that. I don't give a crap if you're a fifth-year senior. I don't care.
No.
Like this is what, I'm the Mike linebacker. I'm the quarterback's defense. Get your freaking butt going, and you need that. You really need that.
He's the kid where the freshmen come in. Drake Bowen's the kid that walks in and says, "Hey, we're about to show you what it means to play here.
Right.
We're gonna. You don't know anything
because I didn't know anything a year ago.
Exactly.
Right.
So, but we're about to show you what Notre Dame football is
right.
and what the Notre Dame football way is. So,
but I don't know who those guys are on offense, Sean. That's my concern. Can Mitchell Evans be that now that he's kind of established himself? I don't know that Mitchell has that kind of personality. I'm hopeful, but then again, he's going to miss probably the first month of the season because of the injury. Does the next quarterback have that mentality? I don't know. You start looking at it, there are some young guys that I'm hopeful of. So, Jason, if you want to know who I hope those guys are, I'm hoping that Billy Schrouth and Ashton Craig can be that kind of guy. I'm hoping that Jeremiah Love can be that kind of guy because he's got some on-field swagger to him. I'm hoping that Jaden Greathouse can be that kind of guy because Jaden is a very confident kid who also will quickly become one of those I don't care who you are type of people. We're going to win this way. Dude, I came from Austin Westlake. We lost like one game in 3 years. This whole losing 3 games in the season crap is for the birds. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't come here for this. That's where I'm kind of looking forward for some of those younger players, Sean, because there is a lot more of that type of, because it's got to be natural. You can't ask J.D. Bertrand to be that guy. You can't ask Joe Alt to be that guy because that's just not who they are. It has to be a part of who a kid is. Now, you can, as a coach, bring it out of a kid if it's there. Hey, man, Drake, I know you want to say stuff, man. You're a sophomore now. You're starting middle linebacker. Like, I need you to let it go because that's who you are. But if Drake's more of a quiet, do your job, just get everybody lined up kind of leader, you can't ask him to be Manti. Just, it's not who he is, right?
You're right. You're right.
And so there are some of those guys, but I do think some of the guys that emerged this year, like Xavier Watts, who has that swagger, now that he's established himself as a dude, now you go into the offseason. Xavier's not just a talented player that you're hoping to project. Now that's the dude on defense now.
Yeah.
And so now when Xavier starts talking, now you're like, what were you saying, Mr. Consensus All-American? Okay, sure, we'll do that. You know what I mean? What would you like me to do, Mr. Led the Nation in interceptions? Cool, I got you. I'll do that. If he would have tried that last offseason, it would have been like, hey, man, why don't you go win a starting job first? Then come talk to me. And I think that's going to be a good thing. But the fact that we don't know who those are, Jason, to me is partly why we can look at the 2023 season as a disappointment. Is because they didn't have that mentality. Good question.
Do you think it's difficult from a position standpoint? Because you mentioned Aldrick Estime. I don't know a lot of teams where the running back is that guy.
Not anymore.
It's usually quarterback, O-line.
Well, it used to be. I mean, Jerome Bettis was a tone setter in Steelers.
Yes, you're right.
But you're getting 25, 30 carries a game.
Yeah.
You're on the field the whole time.
Good point.
It's a different era. It's harder for a running back to be that guy when you're going out and getting 15 carries. Now, when Aldrick carried the ball 25 times against Stanford, did he set a tone in that game? Yes, he did. But if Aldrick was doing that every week, would he have been able to be healthy for the Stanford game? I don't know.
Now, with Aldrick, see, this is a point.
But also, he doesn't have the personality for that either. That's kind of also part of my thing, too. Aldrick's just kind of the smiley, just give me the rock. I don't know that Aldrick's that.
Setting the tone, even in this age at that position, might not be about the number of carries. Let me give you a perfect example. The last offensive drive against Ohio State. When somebody's running in after he just had those first 2 runs, if he was like a leader, he might have looked at the sideline like, no, I'm closing this. I'm not coming off the field. Or if I come off, it's for 1 play. I'm not coming off for 2. Like those type of guys, that mentality, like that's what you're looking for. And maybe it takes me to the interaction that Marcus Freeman had with him and Dylan McCullough on the sideline against Stanford. Like, yo, and he took the responsibility of what Coach Freeman said. Like, yo, get the running back room together. Get like whatever's going on, get it together. And so that's why I asked, because it's easier for a quarterback who touches the ball every play, O lineman every play, and usually the leader of the O line is probably the center in most cases. So I was just wondering if it was positional. And if you have a wide receiver that's very verbally leads on teams, like a Michael Irvin type, which, when you look at the triplets from the Dallas Cowboys, that's rare to have three leaders at wide receiver, running back, and quarterback in their own way. Like all three guys are willing to get in your face. Troy was very much quiet, stoic, but when he needed to get at you, he would get at you. Emmett in a different way. He was kind of the lead by example, go out there, play through injury type of guy. And then Michael Irvin was the guy that was definitely,
So what your point is, you need different types of leaders.
No, my point is,
there are different types of leaders.
No, I'm supporting what you said.
Right.
The game was totally different back then, and now.
But it's my I get what you're saying. My point is, like, there's different types of leaders.
Yeah.
They may come from different positions now. But
Absolutely.
the fact is you need all those types. You can't just have lead by example guys. You can't just have get in your face guys. You need all of it.
Mm-hmm.
You like Mike McGlinchey and Quentin Nelson were like such a great captain tandem, because Quentin was that scary, get in your face, like where McGlinchey was like that. He's eventually going to be like governor of Pennsylvania kind of guy. You know what I mean? Like, hey guys, let's have a conversation about what's going on right now. We need to play better, and we need to, and I'm gonna and guys, fellas, I'm sorry, we've got to do better than that. Where Clinton was like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Like, and they were a great compliment. And of course, they both played really well.
Mm-hmm.
And the point is, McGlinchey was a great leader. Quentin was a great leader, and they did it two completely different ways, personality-wise. But the end result was the same. But you needed both of them. You couldn't just have Q. You couldn't just have McGlinchey. They fit because they were very comparable in that way. And that's like Kyron Williams was Kyron Williams to me is more of a tone setter than Audric Estime was, even though I think Audric was a better running back.
Yes.
Because Kyron had that personality where it was like, if you were a lineman and you weren't blocking for him, insert foot into behind.
Right.
You know what I mean? And he also had that great positive energy too. Like Kyron had a lot of great positive energy. That he was that tone setter. I don't know that he was like captain material because he never got to his senior year and all that. But you don't have to be. It's not about being a captain. It's about he provided the emotional energy for that football team. That's just not Audric, but that's who Kyron is.
Yeah.
That's not who Audric is. I think Jeremiah Love can be a little bit of that. He doesn't have the same personality as Kyron, but he's a very energetic, like he's got some swagger to him on the football field. He's quiet off the field, but he's got some swagger to him on the field.
I think forecasting. I think a guy like Ashton Craig and Billy Shroud have an opportunity.
Hope so.
This goes to how well they can play. But from who they are, like Ashton Craig can be that very calm, the way he's handled himself, and Billy Shroud can be that nasty Quentin Nelson type that'll get in your face. And like you said, if they develop, they can end up being that same type of captain combo down the road, possibly. So I think Notre Dame has found swagger in the portal. I think both of the wide receivers that have committed have swagger in their own way. I really do, especially Chris Mitchell. Chris Mitchell.
Oh, the veterans. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And I think Jaden Greathouse can be swagger.
Oh, I was saying that earlier, Sean. He has that kind of. He has something. That's why I say there's a lot of those younger players that you can't. And you just hope, because what would happen under Kelly at times is some of that would get beat out of them. And like I was enjoyed listening to what you guys were talking about with Oscar, and it's like, we We tell them, Fred, you don't know nothing when Chris. But the problem is, this team isn't where that 90 team was with Chris Zorich because that culture had been established. This team hasn't established that culture. So you're in a position where, like, I kind of want the young guy to come in and challenge the older player because the way you think this should be done is not the way that's going to win football games. I want you to be more like the young guy. I want you to play with that fire, play with that swagger. Don't be afraid to talk a little trash as long as it's, you know what I mean? That's kind of who you are. You know, don't be afraid to be fired up and to be passionate about playing the game of football. And you know, like, to me, like, my dad, it drives my dad nuts when guys will catch a pass for first down and point to a first down. And my whole thing is, it depends. And it depends on who the guy is. Like, when a guy does something and it's like totally scripted and it's like, you know, he's got something, it's like, dude, that's just your thing. Like, this is brand building. But I like those guys that are fired up that they make a catch and get it, but then they're good. I'm like, freaking first down, baby. You know what I mean? Like, I want those guys with fire if they have it. But I was telling you to watch Run Barry Run, which is a great documentary on. I was watching it on Prime the other day. But that's not who Barry Sanders was. You couldn't have asked Barry Sanders to be that. That's just, you know, you needed Lomas Brown to be that, or Kevin Glover, or Herman Moore, or whoever else. You need somebody else to be that because that's just not who Barry was. So you have to have that kind of balance. And sometimes it's okay for your dude to just be a dude on the field, and somebody else has got to be the emotional leader. I mean, Alohi Gilman was never the best player on the Notre Dame defense ever. He was not ever in the top 3, but he was the leader of that dang defense in 2018. I can promise you that. And you had multiple, but you also had Drew Tranquil was the leader of that defense.
Yeah.
You had multiple guys. And then Khalid could just go make plays. Khalid wasn't that guy that like Alohi was, give that big giant let's go speech before a game. But Khalid was the guy that said, okay, I got you. Let me go make this fourth quarter play to win us a ball game, right? So they were different. Khalid was clutch. You need that. He was money. He was a money player. Alohi was that as well, but Alohi was that rah-rah speech, get in your face, you're not doing what you need to do, get your freaking butt lined up. Drew was that way. Tavon just went out and played. You know, I mean, they're just different types of guys, and you need it. Julian Love had a completely different personality than Alohi Gilman.
Yeah.
Julian was more of a go lead by example kind of guy. Alohi was I think that guy might punch me in the face if I don't do what he's telling me to do right now. Right? Like, that's kind of how Zeke Mata was at Notre Dame. This guy's a little nuts. He might actually punch me if I, you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to rip your freaking head off. I think he might be serious. I'm going to go ahead and do what he tells me to do.
Yeah.
And you need some guys like that. Here's a completely random non-football question, but
Irish
also kind of a fun one.
Thanks for the question. Who most cherished gift you got as a kid for Christmas?
I had 2. One is, as I was older, I got a bike. We went through Christmas. I really wanted a bike, a 10-speed, like a you know, we were when we were kids, like not the 10-speed, but like the dirt bike. And I really wanted it. And we went through the Christmas and I didn't get it. So I was a little bummed. And my dad was like, I think it was my dad was like, oh shoot, I think we need to go outside real quick. Went outside and our bikes were there, which was pretty cool. But then the other one's Castle Grayskull. When I got Castle Grayskull kid, that was like, what? I got Castle Grayskull. Yeah, that was, for those of you, it was a He-Man.
Yo, you just made me think about something. I was about to think the first time I got Nintendo.
Oh yeah.
Because I think my dad had to go to, now that I know the story, I think he ended up going to like a Toys R Us that was like 50 miles away from our home or something to find it. And it was like one of the last ones because it was crazy. And I sat there and played that 10-yard fight in that pro wrestling game.
10-yard fight. Wow.
Yeah. He allowed us to actually open the gifts on Christmas Eve.
Okay.
Yeah. So man, that definitely. But I remember also got the aircraft carrier from G.I. Joe one year.
I was never a G.I. Joe guy. You were a G.I. Joe? Okay.
I was a G.I. Joe Transformers guy.
Yeah. I was Transformers He-Man. No, well, that's another one. You just made me think of one. When I got Optimus Prime, but I think that might have been actually for a birthday. But when I got Optimus Prime, I was like, oh yeah.
Prime was a big deal.
Yeah. That was another one. It was hard to find because they sold out so quickly. Yeah. Those are good ones.
Optimus and Megatron were like really difficult to find.
Yeah. See, I never bought Decepticons.
Really?
I never wanted Decepticons. I only wanted Autobots. I was a good, you know what I mean? Like,
So
my
you couldn't create scenarios
nope.
then.
My cousin was a Decepticon guy, and so we would do things together. He was, which kind of says a lot about our personalities.
Okay.
But no, I was more of an Autobots guy. I was, because you know me, Sean, I was always doing the planning. My guys were always planning.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? We were strategizing. I just needed the guys to strategize. Good question. Good question.
Joe Allen, who would you rather have, Riley Leonard or Cal McCord? This is a joke, right? This is the part of the show where we do jokes and bits.
I mean, it's Riley Leonard, certainly. Look, I like Kyle McCord. I do. I think Kyle McCord's getting a bit of a bum rap from some Ohio State fans, and he's kind of being punished for what I think are more so Ryan Day's failures as a coach. But this isn't close. And it's for two reasons. Number one, I think Riley Leonard's a more dynamic playmaker. I think that's a big part of it. I think he's a guy that I look at and believe, he can do things that Kyle McCord can't when things are off script. And I think that's a must for Notre Dame. And where Kyle McCord is more of he's going to hurt you in the pocket. When he beats you, he's going to beat you in the pocket. He doesn't handle pressure as well. And I mean literal pressure as well. The other part too is I just think that the evolution this offense wants to go through fits more of what Riley Leonard is than what Kyle McCord is.
Mm-hmm.
That's just what it comes down to. Kyle McCord is a lot like Sam Hartman. Sean, to your point earlier, is he's a guy that you put in and the pieces around him are pretty good, and you've got to just get the ball where it needs to go to. I like Notre Dame's talent. I don't know that it's quite there yet for that. Plus, there's some question marks about the offensive line, and Riley Leonard's going to have a much better opportunity of making plays at times when the offensive line breaks down than Kyle McCord is. If the offensive line has a bad game with Kyle McCord or Sam Hartman, you're just screwed. I mean, whereas if the offensive line doesn't necessarily play with Riley Leonard, he can still go make some play. I mean, because Notre Dame ate up the Duke offensive line quite a bit as well. Like, we all talk about how much Notre Dame's offensive line got dominated by Duke, and they did. But Notre Dame's defensive line had a day against Duke as well, and Riley was still able to go out there and use his legs to make plays. And you need that. You need that this team especially needs that. Yeah. Now, down the road, can you get away with that? Sure. But right now, they don't. And again, as I said, but the first factor is because Riley Leonard's just a better football player than Kyle McCord, in my opinion.
I agree with that. Better prospect as far as going to the NFL. And I do think Kyle McCord is getting a bad rap. But if Kyle McCord felt like he played well enough to get assurances to be the starter going into next season, then you don't understand being a quarterback at Ohio State. Because if you didn't do what previous great quarterbacks did, which is improve to a certain point in their first year. C.J. Stroud and Justin Fields did that. They both struggled early, similar to you. But by the time they got to the end of that first year, the coaches were like, okay, we got to do. Obviously, you didn't make the Ohio State coaches feel that way. So they have to do what they have to do. If they have to go to the portal, that's what they have to do. And he made the choice not to compete and to go to a place where he can be the guy. And it is what it is. But definitely, it's not even close for me, Brian. Like Riley Leonard, easily. In the Estimate Trucking LLC, is lack of weight the only thing holding Emil Wagner back, or is it a combination of size and technique?
It's not so much weight as it is the ability to move people with the weight that you have. I mean, Emil Wagner is not that much lighter right now than what Robert Hainsey was when he started as a freshman and as a sophomore at Notre Dame. He was 292, never got more than 295. He'd get up to 300 pounds as a senior and then get back to 295. It's more about it's where that weight is distributed. And the problem with Emil is he's got a little bit of a skinnier lower half right now that needs to get filled out, and he's got to really enhance the lower body strength. I think he's a very athletic and explosive kid. I mean, you can watch it in the games he played this year, Sean. I mean, he looks much more comfortable coming off in the run game than he does the pass game. So there's still technical things he's got to learn too. But it really just comes back to, does he have enough in his behind and below to move people and hold up at the next level? or I mean, is like a 60+ snap guy.
Yeah.
And you could see it this year in pass pro. I mean, he'd kind of set and he would lose it, and guys would just kind of drive him back.
Yeah.
And some of that's technical, and some of that's like he just needs another offseason of getting stronger.
Yeah.
Now, the strength maybe only adds 2 to 3 pounds. I don't care. He could also add 12 pounds, get up to 300, and not be any better, because not all weight is good weight.
Right.
It's about building up the lower half. He's done a good job of building up his upper body. I mean, I was looking at a picture of him from when he was a recruit, and you can just see his arms are just so much more defined and thicker, and he's filled out his chest and all that. Now he's got to try to figure out, now he's got to fill out, grow that lower body a little bit. And if it only results in 3-4 pounds, but he starts moving people, and he's able to anchor better, and those type of things, and hold up better at the point of attack, that's really what it comes down to. It's not so much weight, because again, he could add 12 pounds. He added 12 pounds last offseason. He could add another 12 and nothing changes.
Yeah.
It's about the ability to move people and then hold up at the point of attack when you're giving ground, like you do in pass pro. Those are the big concerns I have. But I'm hoping he can figure it out, because the one thing about Emil, he's a very talented young man. There's no doubt about it.
He has an impressive hand punch.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I remember watching one practice, and he just collapsed Nana Safamensa. Just, man. And then he fell into another defensive lineman. So he literally took out 2 guys, and I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. I love his arm length, athleticism, feet. Like, he just has really good tools to be a really good tackle. But like you said, sometimes, man, you got to have that big bottom, man. No point in it helps to have that, to be able to anchor down and hold off, because the game is different, like you said, Brian, right? Players used to try to go around you to get to the quarterback. Now, so many players are good at just coming off with speed and transferring the power and just pushing you back into the quarterback. And you have to be able to hold up against that, man.
Yep.
Yeah. Once again, SMA Trucking. If both starting interior defensive linemen return, do you expect any younger guys to transfer out? And what role do you think Gabriel Rubio, Jason Onye, and Armel Mukam will play next season?
I don't believe they'll transfer out. I mean, not every guys. If this was a world where every kid who wasn't going to start is going to leave, teams would be turning over half their roster every year. And to me, I don't know of any. If someone's going to transfer out, they would have transferred out anyway. What role do I think those guys will have? I mean, with Rubio and Onye, it's going to be the same one they had this year. The hope, if for Rubio, is he can stay healthy. And then the hope for Onye is that he can be more consistent, because Jason will have some really impressive snaps. Like, wow, that's really impressive. And then he'll have a couple snaps you're like, yeah, he's still learning. He still don't know what he's doing yet. And so what you need to do with him, if you're out, like Al Washington did a great job going from what Onye was in 2022 to the growth he needed for 2023. Now it's about taking that to another level and getting more consistent. And then Armel Mukam, it just depends on how he develops this offseason. So he's going to have a chance to be a good player, but don't forget about Devin Houston either. He's a guy that's going to have a chance. And Donovan Heinisch is another guy. He's not going to be easy to pass up. He's not going to be easy to pass up at all. So he's another guy that's going to, I mean, the depth is great. And if somebody transfers out because of those guys coming back, then you have to do that, because you're trying to go win football games next year. That's what it comes down to.
Quinn Kibler, thanks for the mailbag. Was watching some Leonard highlights and didn't see many plays. He is really airing it out. What is the extent of his arm strength? I assume he wasn't asked to do a lot of that, but can.
I don't disagree with that. I mean, I don't agree with that take at all. I think this is why you don't watch highlight tapes, because highlight tapes, when you're watching Riley Leonard, they're going to show off the running ability. That's just the way that he plays the game. But this is a kid, that in 2022 passed for almost 3,000 yards in 13 games with a team that didn't really have great receivers and had multiple 300-yard games. I mean, I'll tell you what, if you want to know what kind of throwing ability he has, here's a great game to go watch. Go watch him duel Sam Hartman 2 years ago in 2022. And he threw for 391 yards that game, completed 70.7% of his passes, and threw 4 touchdowns. That would be a game that I would encourage you to go watch. But the other part of it too is the nature of the Duke offense. They were not throwing the ball down the field very much. That's just not who they were. And they didn't have really the receivers for it. They have a bunch of 5'11", 6-foot guys. I mean, they had the Pankel kid last year who was 6'4", but he was, wasn't a guy that was going to be stretching the field. You know what I mean? So arm talent wise, like I don't believe Riley has a cannon. I mean, he's not a guy that's going to be throwing a bunch of 60-plus yard bombs. He's not a guy that's going to be rolling to his left, throwing across his body, throwing absolute bazookas between three guys like Caleb Williams did against UCLA 2 years ago. It's the throw I have in mind. But he's got really impressive arm talent. Arm strength is good. I mean, he's got really good 20 and in arm strength. And there's two types of arm strength. Some guys can throw really with a lot of velocity 20 and in, but they don't have great downfield arms. Some guys have great downfield arms, but not as great on some of the other stuff. When you watch Riley throw, he's throwing 15-yard outcuts from the boundary to the field. He's throwing stop routes to the field. He can throw corner routes with it gets up and down quickly. He can attack the middle of the field, and he's great at changing arm angles. So there's a lot of that to his game that I don't know you're going to – if you're just watching game highlights, they're not going to show him throwing a 12-yard speed out to the field. They're going to show him making three people miss in the backfield and then running for 40 yards. That's what they're going to show. It's just the nature of it. So I like his arm talent. Now, there's parts of his game that still need a lot of work. There's no doubt about that as he transitions to this offense, but he's got a lot of arm talent, in my opinion.
Given the state of the O-line, do you think Pendleton, Jagasaw, and Absher will be given a fair chance to compete for real playing time? So which two do you think will make the biggest impact?
Certainly they will. I mean, look, as far as which two, Jagasaw, I mean, either one of those two. I mean, if I had to lean somewhere, I'd probably go Absher just because he'll be competing at tackle as well. And there's going to be need for tackle battles where it'll be, maybe a little tougher road at guard. Although I would love to see Sam Pendleton and Rocco Spindler and a lot of other guys get a chance to beat out Pat Coogan next year. I'm not optimistic. For whatever reason, Joe Rudolph just seems to be fully aboard that Pat Coogan train, no matter what. And I don't get it, but there's just way more physically gifted players that need to be given that opportunity. And hopefully Pendleton's one of those guys. But I mean, right now, just because of opportunity, I would assume it'd be Jagasaw and Absher because Pendleton's a pure inside guy.
Yeah,
I think Jagasaw and Absher could both play guard, but they're both also guys that have a chance to play at tackle.
Thank you, Charles Lynch, for the mailbag. Why did Holden Stays transfer? Understand why the rest of the guys left, but haven't heard a reason for Stays, who was slated to start.
No, he was not slated to start.
He was not slated to start.
No, he might have started the bowl game, but that's not even a given.
No.
I mean, Eli Raridan was fast on his tail. I mean, he was pushing for playing time. He was the guy that they were designing stuff for against Wake Forest, not Holden. Not that they liked Holden, but the fact is, Sean, look, man, here's the deal. Holden had multiple opportunities to seize hold of the job. He had 100 yards against NC State. The next week, Mitchell Evans misses the Central Michigan game, and Holden's he's not there. He just doesn't play well. He drops a third down pass. He just doesn't step up and do what he needed to do. And so they loved Holden, but there were just other guys that were just as good, and he wasn't going to be the guy next year. I mean, he was going to have a battle to hang on to the number 2 job next season. And that's not a knock on Holden. I think that's a really good pickup for Tennessee. It's just that's how loaded that room is at tight end. That's what it boils down to for me.
Agree. Some chatter about Leonard ended up at Auburn or Ohio State. How confident are you that he ends up Irish?
I'd stop paying attention to chatter, guys. It's his announcement to make. I don't know how many more breadcrumbs and hints and things that we can say about not reading the things that you're reading about other schools. Just let it play out. I'm very confident. Very confident. Just let it play out.
Thanks for the mailbag, Michael Johnson. With Howard Cross returning, what are the chances that Riley Mills returns also?
Pretty good from what we've heard. Pretty good. I don't know that a final decision has 100% been made, but right now with both him and Xavier Watts, if I were to make a prediction right now, I would predict they both come back. Again, I don't believe full final decisions have been made for either, but that's where it's trending right now.
Oh, that defense has so much potential next year.
Yes, it does.
Oof.
Yeah.
Kevin Bill, thank you for the mailbag. Any concern with all the drops from Collins last year? Heard he led Clemson in drops. I believe he tipped an easy catch on the Morrison pick last year.
No, that was more.
That wasn't easy. The one that
It was not
Xavier?
easy. Yeah.
No.
The defense did a good job there.
Yeah.
I went back and looked at that because I don't know if he led the team in drops, but I mean, he had 5 drops last year and he had 3 the year before that and 5 the year before that, which is a pretty high number. But when I went back and looked at it, Kevin, I didn't see an issue. Some of those drops were like, yeah, that's not a drop. Because I'd go back and look and see who Pro Football Focus, what games had as a drop, and I'd go back and try to find those. Because part of evaluation is you look at the good games, but you also look at the games where he didn't produce or he had some drops. And I think there was like maybe 1 or 2 where you're like, man, you got to catch that ball. Drops are going to happen.
Mhm.
Everybody drops balls. But the others were like, yeah, that's a tough ask right there. That's a real tough ask to count that as a drop. And so it's not a concern for me. And then one of them he had was like, just dude, don't run until you've caught the ball, which happens. I mean, Michael Mayer had a lot of drops his first 2 years, right? And by the time he was done at Notre Dame, he didn't have any drops last year. It's just part of the evolution of a pass catcher.
That's a really good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the evolution of pass catchers. That you've got to. Sometimes it's a focus thing. You know, it's definitely not a hands thing. That's for darn sure. It just comes down to what your focus needs to be. And then also, like I said, some of those drops are put in situations where, you're asking a lot of that dude. But yeah, Michael Mayer in his career at Notre Dame had 12 drops, 5, 3, and 4. So, I mean, drops are going to happen. And he had great hands. But when you put balls into tight windows, that's going to increase the odds that a ball gets dropped, especially when a defender makes a play. Like that was a really tight window that Cade Klubnik tried to put that ball, and Benjamin Morrison made a good play on it. Yeah, Bo needed to play it better, but Benjamin made a good play.
That was just a darn good play.
Yeah. It's a fair question though, Kevin, because that was one of the things I questioned when I looked at the numbers and stuff and started breaking down the film. That's something I looked for. It's a very fair question.
Irish Blooded, if Minchie plays in the bowl, does he lose his red shirt? Lost track of how many games he has been in.
Yeah, he wouldn't lose a red shirt even if the rule was different. But my understanding, according to what Marcus Freeman said, is bowl games don't count towards that.
Yeah, they don't.
I hope Kenny plays. I don't have a lot of faith that they're going to play him. That's just where I'm at right now. But he needs to play, in my opinion.
Jacob Hayden, thank you for the mailbag. Out. Where would you rank the wide receiver room now with Mike Brown and the guys who transferred in compared to Stuckey and the guys who left?
Well, if we're looking at 2024, the receiver room is going to be a lot better in 2024 than it was in 2023. Number one, I think it's a big upgrade at coach. Number two, you're going to have so much more experience this year than last year. You're going to have 4 seniors or older in the room.
Yeah.
You're going to have different body types. So I think that you maybe were lacking. You're not going to have as many where your entire roster is basically a bunch of slots, which is basically what the receiver room was for a chunk of this year outside of the Merriweather.
Mm-hmm.
Guys like Greathouse and Faison are going to have a whole year of experience under their belt. And, because like Greathouse and Faison played a lot more than Tobias did as a freshman. And so you're going to have those guys. They're going to be this is going to sound like I like Rico Flores, but that's not a loss. I mean, they're going to be fine there. What I mean is like not a loss. It's not that he's a bad kid. It's just like they're going to be fine. I mean, I said all season they were putting him in positions to be the dude when he shouldn't be put in position to be the dude. He is a guy that is a key piece to the puzzle. And essentially you lost him and Tyree and Tobias, and you're going to replace him with Bo Collins, Chris Mitchell, Cam Williams, Micah Gilbert, and Logan Saldate, and KK Smith, plus a better coach. I I think the room's going to be better. The key is going to be, can you get Thomas and Colsey back healthy? That's going to be the key to me. And can Greathouse take that next step as a player? Like, to me, I think Jaden Greathouse could ultimately hold the key to how good the receiver room is next year. Not Mitchell, Collins, Thomas, Colsey, Cam Williams, with all due Faison. If Jaden Greathouse can take that year 2 jump I think he's capable of, that could be the thing that really separates things. Because if you get him dominating over the middle and from the slot, it's going to open up so many more opportunities for the tight ends and the outside players. He could have a really big impact.
Don McGriz, thanks for the mailbag. Happy Monday, mailbag. Which position group on each side of the ball needs to get the most out of these 15 bowl practices and games?
Offensive line, 100% on offense. 100% on offense. And in linebacker on defense, I really think it's going to be good to see guys like Bowen and Alsbury and Snead getting a lot of reps at linebacker. They really need to take a jump. Really need to take a jump, in my opinion. What do you think, Sean?
Man, for me, O-line is definitely immediate. But I think the wide receiver core with Mike Brown, I think it's going to be very interesting to watch as well. Like, do we see any improvement in these practices from these young wide receivers? That's going to bear watching as well. So I would kind of put like a little star next to the wide receivers in the bowl game as well. But I agree with you defensively. I agree with you defensively. Thank you for the super chat, Michael S. When do you think Leonard will announce his choice? I mean, when he's ready to.
I don't think we're going to be waiting too much longer, people. I just wish you guys would just learn to let stuff play out and just trust the process a little bit, and just I'm not going to say
it was like last week.
I'm not going to lecture anybody today. I'm sorry.
No, when people were, sometimes, there's a method to the madness, right? And some people wait for other people to announce before they're going to announce, so they don't step on the commitment of somebody else
or departure.
And they're coordinating with said university, school, whatever, on the release and all of that. And then, like last week, when everybody was like, when are we going to find out who's opting out? Well, I mean, most of the guys are on the banquet circuit and aren't even at Notre Dame. And then the Notre Dame people are on the road at the award. I think Katie was at the award banquet with the players and not in the office. So, she would be involved with the release. Well, they probably could still release stuff without her.
It's so absurd that they haven't released all that they went Monday to Friday, and none of those other things that we all knew were going to happen or been released yet. So it's like, that's why we did the mailbag on Thursday. I was really pissed because it's like, I want to preview the game. I want to break down the game, but I can't, because I can't talk about this guy, and this guy not playing, because we're not going to steal his moment. And then I'm not going to lie to y'all and talk about these guys playing when I know they're not playing. And it's like, there's no reason to have waited this long. There's no reason that some of these players that we could talk about have not, like, I know they know they're leaving. They've known for a while now.
Yeah.
And it's annoying. It just, this attempt at controlling every little bit. It's got to come out this. It's got to come out this. And then just go 3-4 days. And you drop 3 bits of information in an hour and a half on Sunday. You couldn't have dropped one of those on Saturday?
Yeah.
Just whatever.
Yeah, it is. You know how it is. We get frustrated about,
it does come across as, I'll be honest, it comes across as like intentional. Like, when you release 3 things that close together, we can't get the most out of what we're doing, because if 3 things come out right at once, none of them are going to be like the big deal. They're all kind of part of it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just space it out, because like they don't care about.
Even with the Mike Brown announcement, it was like a Sunday night.
Right after Howard Cross announced he was coming back, and then right before Bo Collins announced he was transferring.
Right.
They knew when all of those things were going to happen.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right, let's get to some more here, Sean.
BD, I couldn't agree more with regards. Thanks for the super chat, Steve. I'm sorry. Couldn't agree more with regards to allowing transfers and who are not coming to Notre Dame for a degree. The standard is the standard for an MD degree. It should be fair, but I don't want it cheap.
That's the key. Should Notre Dame as an institution work with kids who are outstanding students, but also outstanding football players to be able to transfer as undergrads? Yes, they should. Should they sacrifice, hey, we're going to take this kid who took these garbage generic classes at so-and-so school and got a 2.5, but he runs a 4.3? No, no, because that kid's not going to get anything out of Notre Dame for anything other than football. And that's just not who Notre Dame should be, in my opinion. And I don't believe that you have to sacrifice winning in championships for that. I think it's like it's either lower your standards significantly because all the great players who look a certain way and run a certain way and from certain part of the country, just they don't care about this, or just assume your team is going to predominantly look like this and be a certain way and not win, and there's no happy mediums. Bull crap. And, like things change over time, but go back and look at the 88 team. There were plenty of guys that weren't maybe the ideal typical Notre Dame student, but came here and thrived because it mattered to them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And they did whatever was needed to get here and thrive. Where if you get some kid who's at a school and he's taking a bunch of gen ed classes and not going to class half the time, I don't care what he runs in the 40. But there's plenty of kids who have all the talent in the world and care about those things and come here and thrive. And you need to find those guys and bring those guys here. You don't have to settle for some kid who doesn't want to do the work to be successful. You don't need to settle on that kid, because there are plenty of kids who aren't that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that are also very talented football players. And they need to find those guys. That's going to be the key. And there are more than people think there are.
Yeah. Brian Elliott, thanks for the super chat. Thanks for the content, guys. I like how you threw the B in there with the 2 E's. Good stuff. I'm excited to see what is in store for the next year. This year was a disappointment to me personally, but I believe in better things, or that better things are to come. Let's go, Irish.
I agree. It was a very disappointing year. There's no doubt about that. No doubt about that. But I hope next year is better, because this year sucked. It really did. I'm not going to lie. It really sucked.
Hey, they hit the over. If you took the over in Vegas.
Yeah, that's true.
They hit the over. So that's a good thing. But no, look, there's a lot to look forward to, right? I say this all the time, and sometimes we get so focused on the blessing that we really don't understand how grateful we should be for avoiding the catastrophe. See, the blessing is the national championship, right? Like people, like the things that come up to manifestation, people like, oh man, that's wonderful. But what could have happened that didn't happen that you might not even know about? And for that, I think multiple times last 2 seasons, the seasons could have gone off the rail and become even worse than it ended up. And you're looking at a man that's a head coach for the first time in Notre Dame that has his first 2 years has been better than his predecessor's first 2 years. So as much as you want to be disappointed, the talent is in considerable better shape than it was when he took over on the roster. You always wanted the quarterback situation to be dealt with and improved. Hey, you might not like the way he's going about it with it being the portal, but hey, he's identified that. He's trying to solve the issue. There are so many things to be positive about than to focus on, the disappointment of what could have been. It's a lot of teams, but other than the 4 teams that are going to be playing for the championship, that have the same feeling, what could have been. Everybody else is in that same position. What could have been? This game, this one game here, this one game here. It's par for the course if you don't get the job done, man. And it's like there's only one team at the end of the year in the NFL that's going to feel like they accomplished their goal. So, it's par for the course. And somebody else mentioned culture. And like, yo, why hasn't a culture been established? Man, culture is not something you just come in the first year and just establish that. There's so many moving parts to that. The right staff, players that buy in, dealing with players that were used to another culture, when you get there. It's just so many different facets that play into things getting to a point where, it is where it needs to be. So, going into the third year, would I say this year is any more important than last year? I mean, that's subjective. You can make that debate or make that argument. But the opportunity is there. The opportunity was definitely there with the Ohio State game. It's a game you should have won. There's no way around that. You sit down with Marcus Freeman, I'm sure he would tell you flat out, we should have won that game. The Louisville game, I'm sure the coaches would sit there and tell you, yeah, we should have been better prepared for that game. We should have won that game. Heck, they might tell you we should have beat Duke by more points.
Yeah.
Than we did. It is, I understand the disappointment.
I mean, I get where you're coming from, Sean, but I kind of feel like it's like with a lot of these things, there's it doesn't always have to be this or this, right? Like, yes, it could have been worse, but I'm not going to pat you on the butt and say great job because it didn't collapse. You know what I mean? Like, I get what you're saying, but like to me, I still am always going to look at this season like I did 2017, like I did 2015, where I'm going to be like, sure, it could have been worse. It could have been 2016, but gosh, it was such a huge missed opportunity. And that doesn't mean like somebody on the board yesterday was like, if they're not in the playoff next year, they need to fire Marcus Freeman. Like, that's just so absurd. But then there's also the thing where I don't want to get it. This is my opinion. I don't want to get into the realm that too many people were with Brian Kelly where, yeah, it could be worse. We could have Charlie Weiss again or Ty Willingham again. So accept this. I'm like, no, I'm not going to accept that because it's not as bad as it was then because it still should have been better. And there are times when you look at a season and say, yeah, it was disappointing. I hope they could have been better. But you look at them like, yeah, that team was better than you were. That team was better than you were. And there's not a single team Notre Dame lost to this year that you're like, that team was better. I mean, you lost to a Clemson team that was 4-4 and had 8 starters out with injuries. Like, just no excuse for that. No excuse for losing Louisville the way you did. And so I that's where my frustration comes from. Yes, it could have definitely been a lot worse. But it's all part of, I'll say this, it is all part of the building process. Because even, you look at Coach Holtz's first 2 years, went 5-6 in year 1, started off in year 2, and things looked pretty great. I mean, a Heisman Trophy winner and Tim Brown that season. And that was a really dangerous team for a while. They'd climbed up all the way to number 4 at one point in time and then up to number 7. And then they were 8-1 and ranked 7th in the country. And they've got Penn State on the road and Miami on the road coming up. And if they win those 2 games, boy, they got a shot to go do something. They lost both of them and then went in the bowl game and got destroyed by Texas A&M and finished the year 8-4. Very disappointing end of that season that showed a lot of promise. But the lessons learned from that season, good and bad, are what led to the necessary changes for Coach Holtz, who needed to change the culture, just like Marcus Freeman, to say, hey, we're not going to have this happen again. We're going to change this. And then that led to 12-0 the next season. And so certainly the culture needs to change, but it doesn't that's the point I will agree with Sean. It doesn't change overnight. And it does take time. And sometimes it takes disappointment and failure before kids finally get it. This is why I've been telling you need to do this, or you know what? Some of these kids here, I thought I could win with them, but I can't. And we're going to weed out the guys that we can't win with this offseason. And so you'd hear about the crazy winter workouts they were doing because Lou Holtz was basically saying, I'm trying to get some of y'all to quit. Because you know what I mean? Like, and seriously, and to a degree, I mean, you see that at all type of levels where mental toughness and physical toughness are so important. Some of them are more, you look at what is basic training about? What is the SEAL training about? It's about getting the kids, the guys to quit who can't make it, who can't do it. And that's part of what you need to see here is like, you need to, whether it's extra hard workouts or, okay, I'm going to bring in some transfers and see how you respond to it. And if you don't want to compete, leave.
Yeah.
right? And so it's all that's all part of it. And no, culture's not changed overnight. And when you do have a younger coach, he's going to make mistakes, which Marcus Freeman certainly has. But the question is, does he learn the right lessons from it? That's the big question.
Yeah.
He will learn lessons from it. He will make changes. Will they be the right lessons and the right changes? That's a different question for a different day.
And one of the experiences that it brings up in my mind is, which goes back to the point, like some people get so caught up in what has happened and the disappointment of it that you really don't get an opportunity to be thankful for, what exists and what could have happened. Like I just never forget, my daughter's phone rings, she's out, my wife picks it up, she wakes me up. Ari was just in an accident. It's like 12 o'clock at night. She's coming home from my god sister's house. Jump in the car, flying over there, right? She's in tears. She's rattled. She's, Daddy, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry about the car. I don't give a darn about that car. I don't care. Like, yes, eventually I'm going to be disappointed in the premium going up and what I have to pay to get you. Yes, that disappointment is there. But in this moment, I care less about that car. Like, you're okay? Then we're good. And in this moment, we can be disappointed about this season. Like, that's a wreck. Cool. That's a wreck. There's nothing you can do about that. But what exists is we don't have the same dysfunction that was there in one position room. We get a chance to improve the strength and conditioning. The opportunity is there. We have a head coach that shows accountability and is willing to move on and improve on those mistakes and hold his coaching staff accountable. Like things are in place for things to get better. And that is what I mean. Like, don't get so caught up on the wreck of the season that you don't see the promise of what can be with the talent that's on the roster. Even though it's young, but the talent is there and the promise is there. So when I say like kind of be thankful in this season, because it kind of lines up with the season that we're in. But yeah, that's why you watch the Sun Bowl, for the promise, for those young players, and for
because
everything
that's what real
to.
fans do.
Yeah.
Right? You're not a real fan if you only care about your team when it's good.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like you said, you use the marriage thing. Like, in my opinion, why do a lot of marriages fail? I can only speak to the ones that I've been around. I can't speak to people I don't know. But a lot of the ones I'm around, because they got married and they lived in this world where everything was going to be perfect. It was all be like the courtship. And as soon as tough times came, I'm out.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't really love that person, because if you did, you'd see through it. You'd fight through it. I can promise you there are long stretches of my marriage where my wife and I didn't like each other very much, but we loved each other. And we understood what commitment and what it meant to be in that, till death do us part meant something. That, so like, I didn't just love her when it was easy.
Oh, man.
It's true love is the love that it lasts through the dark times, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's same thing with fans. Like, if you're truly a fan, it doesn't mean you need to like it or be happy.
No.
But I've never understood that I'm not going to watch them anymore. I'm like, I don't get that. I mean, if I was ever going to do that, it would have been during the Brian Kelly era. I promise you.
Yeah.
But like, it's still like, but it's still my team.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't like what I'm seeing, and I'm going to be pissed about it and complain about it in the chat, and that's all good. Totally get it. But it's still my team. I'm still watching.
Yeah.
That's just my take. But I still say, but we also as a fan base should never settle, and that's always the danger, because I felt like there was way too much of that during the Brian Kelly era. And I want to, and I'm not saying this is what you're doing, Sean. This is just my opinion. We need to make sure that as much, because Marcus Freeman is so much more likable than Brian Kelly and easier to root for than Brian Kelly.
Yeah.
But we can't change the standard just because we like him more.
Right.
And because he's, we want him to succeed, or for whatever reason, you can't change. The standard is still the standard. And if Brian Kelly would have gone 9-3 this season, I'd be ripping Brian Kelly for going 9-3 this season. It's like him going 9-3 with a Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback, right? Which is hilarious. But but there are also a lot of reasons to be excited about what's coming. And that's kind of, will they learn the proper lessons? That's going to be the question.
That's the
That's going to be the
opportunity
question.
at hand. Yep.
Yeah. We actually need to get out of here. I did want to answer a couple questions before we get out of here. Just real briefly, NC Notre Dame fan, Sean and Brian, do you think Caleb Downs picked Notre Dame that he would have started over Xavier Watts? Last I checked, they have 2 starting safeties. Why would he start over Watts? I don't even understand. Like, so you're telling me they would have benched Watts and started Caleb Downs alongside DJ Brown? Why wouldn't your question be how good? Like, this is talking about, like, I don't understand. Man, imagine how good of a safety tandem Xavier Watts and Caleb Downs would have been. Why were we even having a conversation about whether or not he'd be starting over Xavier Watts? Like, I don't even understand why that would even be a question. Here's a comment that I like from Katie Keevers. If anything, Sam Hartman paved the way for what exactly Notre Dame can do in the NIL era. Huge help for recruiting, having that example to point to. That is a great point, because Sam Hartman showed if you come to Notre Dame and you have value, you're the quarterback, you will make money. Sam Hartman had a very mediocre season, let's be honest, for a solid, good top 20 team. Imagine what you can make as a quarterback of a team that leads Notre Dame to the playoff. Right? I mean, that's Ian Book would have cleaned up in the NIL era. Cleaned up. Now, I have my feelings about Ian Book as a quarterback, but Ian Book would have cleaned up in the NIL era if that was the case during his Notre Dame tenure. So I think that's a great point by Katie, Sean, is these kids coming in like a Sam Hartman and making a lot of money in NIL is opening a lot of people's eyes to, like, hey, Notre Dame's serious about, like, I'll tell you this. I had a parent reached out to me and told me that there was a lot of schools reaching out to his kid, who's not even in the portal, by the way, not even looking at going to the portal, and they're offering him huge NIL money. And that's a different conversation that we can have later. But his thing was like, is Notre Dame offering as much as other schools? No. But they are definitely doing enough to make us happy with being here. Now, this is a kid that no one's advertised what he's doing in NIL. I mean, it's none of that stuff. But it's like Notre Dame's doing a lot more than people think now. Is every kid going to be happy with it? No. But, dude, there's kids jumping in the portal because they're only making $1 million. They want to make $3 million. I mean, you're always going to have those kids. But Notre Dame is doing a lot more in the NIL universe than a lot of people realize. And I think Sam Hartman, to Katie's point, absolutely showed the potential, the earning potential that you can have. Like, imagine if Jaden Daniels did what he did at LSU at Notre Dame. Like, that would be nuts how much money he would have made in NIL deals. Because LSU is still a regional program when it comes to the brand. The brand.
Make sure Preston doesn't hear that.
Hey. Bro waited 2 years to try to come at me and just came out with some nonsense.
It had a screenshot. I was like, oh, you're so corny. Oh, man, you're so corny. He's still mad at that beat down.
Exactly. He's still in his feelings because I owned him on his own show. It's not my fault you don't know what you're talking about, and I knew more about your roster than you do. That's not my fault.
And it's not my fault that you're getting the same thing that we got from Brian Kelly. So, right. I mean, you thought all of a sudden he was going to get to LSU, and because it's LSU, all of a sudden Brian Kelly was going to become a totally different coach.
Right. No. But and I don't even mean this as a shot at LSU. LSU is a national power in football, but football is different than brand power, right? Like, nobody in California is going to care about having an LSU quarterback in an advertisement. They will if it's a Notre Dame quarterback, if he's that kind of player. That's just a fact, right? Just like USC is a brand, as a national brand. So Caleb Williams goes and wins a Heisman Trophy at USC. We see him on a lot more commercials than we saw Jaden Daniels. And I would argue that Jaden Daniels' season this year was even more dynamic than what Caleb Williams was last year, because he was so dynamic in both ways. And to me, just literally put a team on his shoulders. In the SEC, but he doesn't have the same brand power that, like, if Caleb Williams would have put up the numbers this year that Jaden Daniels did, oh my, there's not even a conversation about who should get the Heisman Trophy. But it was with Jaden Daniels because it's about brand.
Mm-hmm.
And Notre Dame, say whatever you want, is still the biggest brand in college sports. Are they the best football program? Clearly not. But it's not about that. It's about the brand. And Sam Hartman showed that the brand in this era of NIL has a lot to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was something that is pretty big. So, Sean, I'm actually having some connection issues here, so we're gonna have to wrap this up, and because I'm probably gonna have to drop this and restart it and everything, and so there's a lot of questions I wanted to get to, and I'm sorry that we're not able to get to all those, but we will be back. We're gonna have a 6 o'clock tonight, have an IB Nation Sports Talk show. If some news breaks between now and then, and we're expecting some news to break over the next 24 hours. Several bits of news is what we're hoping and anticipating for. Then I will jump on that show as well at 6 o'clock and talk about it. Otherwise, we'll talk about it tomorrow. So that's going to do it for today's show, everybody. Thank you all so much. For Sean, I'm Brian. If you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. And more importantly, have a phenomenal rest of your day. And we'll talk to you again soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.